All right, folks, we are just about at 7 o'clock exactly. If the board is ready to start. Yes? No? Yes? Excellent. Call the meeting to order. Ms. Widener, attendance.
Dr. Campley, Mr. Fountain,
Here.
Mr. Keenan,
Here.
Mr. Leggett,
Here.
Mr. McKinney,
Here.
Dr. Sadler,
Here.
Mr. Saylor,
Here.
Dr. Weston,
Here.
Ms. White.
Here. And with that, 1.03, 1.04, Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silent reflection.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mitchell, would you mind reading the mission statement? I think you just have to hit that mic if you don't mind, Trina.
The mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally.
Thank you so very much. 1.06, it's the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Motion.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. 1.07 is special recognition will take place next week. 1.08 is comments on any topic. See, there are some folks in the audience. There were some sign-ins for comments, so we will go in order. I will state for the purposes of the public and the record that comments on any topic are afforded to the community at large for a duration of 3 minutes. You need to state your name and municipality. With regards to decorum, if what you have to say would not be appropriate for a business or a school setting, I ask you to refrain and keep it professional and kind. Unlike other meetings, such as committee or open forum meetings, there is no dialogue. There is actually just a 3-minute duration, and then we move on to the next comment. So it's not a question and answer period. It's actually just a comment period. And with that, I open the floor, and I see Stephanie Carey as the first to come up. And you'll just hit that microphone. There's a button right there on the...
Oh, it says push.
Yep, perfect, thank you.
Good evening. I'm a mother of 4 children in the PV school district. My oldest 2 are currently in 1st and 3rd at South. My younger 2 will join them shortly. Tonight I'm here to speak out strongly against the committee's
You're in
proposal.
which municipality?
Hallsville Borough.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it, continue.
I truly do not feel the committee has given enough justification for such a drastic change. Seemingly an issue with space could be dealt with by less extreme measures, such as modular classrooms or adjusting class size. With enrollment being down, this also may not even be an issue in a year or 2, and then what will we have made the switch for? As you will hear from others tonight, I'm extremely concerned with the transportation and the sheer distance of West from many of our students' homes. The estimated bus times seem inaccurate. My house is currently over 20 minutes away from West, and that is not considering traffic or bus stops. The information provided to us at the last community meeting shows the children boarding the bus an hour before the school start time, which is not only far too long, but leads me to believe that the committee is also aware that these bus rides will not be 35 minutes as proposed. It simply is not fair to the children. The thought of them starting their day on an hour-long bus ride and ending a full day with the same is disheartening. Additionally, my daughter Claire will join South as a kindergarten student next year. She is a type 1 diabetic. I've written to you previously to express that the thought of her or others like her spending an hour or so on the bus makes me extremely concerned. What if something goes wrong? What will happen to these children? During the community meeting of last week, it was proposed that students with medical issues will ride on a medical van with a nurse and make stops to pick up the other students with medical needs. It saddens me deeply to think that my daughter, who has a medical condition beyond her control, will be singled out and separated from her peers because her school is too far away for her to get there safely. Not to mention length of her bus ride, as they will likely drive all over to find the other students with medical issues. She doesn't need a nurse or a special bus. She simply needs a bus ride that is a reasonable amount of time. I've talked to mothers of other children with medical issues, and they echo my concerns. Let's see. Additionally, having these centers will cause our children to make a massive transition every 2 years. The change of school is huge to a child and comes with a great deal of nerves that will not only impact these children as a whole, but will detract from their education as they will be tasked with acclimating to a new school after just getting settled in. They will also be thrust into a much larger school environment. When my husband and I looked at buying our home, we specifically picked PV over Springford because we didn't want our children to become lost in a sea of students, and I fear that this realignment will do just that. I also struggle to see how this would work with sports and extracurricular activities. The current setup of sports teams and extracurriculars for each East and West allows many students to be afforded the chance to play sports for their school and to get otherwise involved. If we are to cut it down to just one center for these age groups, there will be less of an opportunity for many of these children to participate. This also negatively impacts students who have less financial means and have thus far not been able to play recreational sports. Too many students, not enough teams, equals more cuts, which equals less opportunity to those who may have been waiting for middle school and their chance to finally try out. There's no disputing how important it is the kids to be involved in sports activities and their school community, and I believe that this realignment will limit that chances for many students. I could go on and on, but I strongly urge you to think of the kids and just consider how drastic this change will be.
Thank you very much. Margaret Detweiler? Just your name and municipality, please.
Hi, I'm Margaret Detweiler, and I am in Collegeville Borough. I just lost my notes. I'm a parent of a student at South Elementary, and I am urging you to reconsider the realignment plan. I have some really strong concerns about the amount of time that my children will spend on the bus. I think that it's a really delicate time in their lives, especially considering the transition 5th and 6th grade and what specifically young girls can go through during that time, to spend an extended period of time on a bus. I'm also concerned with the sports and how they will be able to participate with so many students in a 5th, 6th grade center and a 7th, 8th grade center. I'm also involved in sports activities outside of the schools, and I see a number of students from our district that participate in sports away from school during times that will be impacted with these changes. Kids won't be able to get to activities that PV can't provide, but that these kids are ingrained in and choose to do. We're limiting the amount of time that they'll have at home, at outside activities. So thank you for your time.
Very much. Ashley Smith?
Hi, my name is Ashley Smith, and I live in Collegeville Borough. I'm a parent of a 3rd grader at South who would be in the first class affected by the proposed grade level realignment as a 5th grader. I also have a 5-year-old twin starting kindergarten next year. I'm here to express my deep disagreement with this proposal. My first concern is why this move is necessary in the first place. If space is the issue, why haven't we explored other solutions like adjusting class sizes, adding modular classrooms, or even adjusting elementary school boundaries? Enrollment is trending down, and accurate data on future enrollment is not yet available. Instead of shifting kids around every few years, shouldn't we be considering all possible solutions before making such drastic changes? Next is the issue of transportation. The bus ride estimates seem extremely inaccurate to me. We keep hearing it will only be 35 minutes, but the proposal suggests a 7:20 a.m. pickup for an 8:15 start time for my area. That's 55 minutes before school even begins. It feels like a built-in buffer anticipating longer rides. An hour-long bus ride is unreasonable for 5th and 6th graders, especially for those who already struggle with attending school. Beyond the length of the bus ride, the location itself is incredibly inconvenient for families. Middle School West is nearly 11 miles from my home. If my child is sick and needs to be picked up, if they forget something important, or if I need to meet with a teacher, it is now a minimum of an hour round trip. That is a huge burden, especially for working parents who cannot easily step away midday. Another major concern is the constant school transitions. This plan would have our kids switching schools every 2 years, which research shows can be disruptive to learning, social stability, and emotional well-being. The district claims this plan will improve transitions and unify students, but I see the opposite, more frequent transitions and 5th graders feeling like tiny fish in a much bigger pond. I also have questions about the so-called benefits. Why do academic enrichment and social emotional programs for 7th and 8th graders require merging schools? If those programs are a priority, shouldn't they be accessible regardless of school structure? Similarly, I've heard that the 5th and 6th grade center will have recess and a new playground will be built. but at what cost? Will it realistically be finished before our third graders arrive in 2026? Finally, our kids will lose the much anticipated big kid experience of fifth graders. I've heard talk of creating leadership opportunities for fourth graders instead, but even if that happens, they still won't be the big kids of the school. They'll still have fifth graders above them, which is not the same as being the true leaders of the building. And with everything else going on, how will there even be time to thoughtfully plan for this? These kids started kindergarten in masks in the middle of the COVID pandemic. They've already missed out on so much, and now we're taking these milestones away from them too. I deeply disagree with this idea and strongly feel that it will have lasting negative consequences for our children, families, and community. This plan feels rushed with far too many unanswered questions. I urge you to slow down, reconsider, and fully explore all alternatives before making such a significant change. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Janine Ketterer. I apologize if I said your name wrong. You could just correct me.
My name is Janine Ketterer. I'm in Collegeville Borough. I'm the parent of a South Elementary School student and a soon-to-be South Elementary School student. I'm here to express my deep disappointment and frustration with the proposed redistricting plan and the way that the school board has handled the communication related to it. First and foremost, I believe that the board has not been transparent in its communication regarding the proposal. Many parents who are balancing work and family responsibilities do not have time to thoroughly read all of the newsletters. Even when they do, information can easily be overlooked. Just this week was the first time that I saw this mentioned in the principal's newsletter. Despite the significance of this proposal, there have been no flyers or direct communication sent home in the children's folders, materials that parents regularly check. Instead, the details of this plan have been scattered across various sources, making it difficult to access. I personally became aware of this proposal only through the word of mouth of friends and social media posts of other community members. The lack of direct and accessible communication raises concerns that the school board is intentionally minimizing public awareness, particularly given the widespread opposition within the community. Additionally, the justification for this redistricting plan has been framed as capacity issues. However, when community members have asked specific questions related to capacity in public meetings, the response has been vague or redirected. The lack of clarity makes it difficult to believe that capacity is the sole or primary reason for this proposal. The board has a responsibility to provide clear, data-driven explanations for this decision, and thus far, I feel has failed to do so. I strongly oppose the proposed redistricting plan for the several following reasons. It is unreasonable to require young children to wake up significantly earlier, wait for a bus in the dark, and endure a long bus ride when more practical and beneficial alternatives are available. Furthermore, this plan would remove children from their familiar, close-knit school communities, placing them in a much larger, less supportive environment before they are developmentally ready. Additionally, increased student population in certain schools will limit children's opportunities to participate in school extracurricular activities, as more students are competing for the same limited resources and programs. I urge the board to reconsider this plan and prioritize transparency, student well-being, and community input within the decision-making process. Thank you.
Very much. Kevin Vargo.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Kevin Vargo, Collegeville Borough. I joined the listening session last Thursday, and the reason I'm here tonight is because I, along with many others, didn't feel heard at that session, so I'm hoping the board will be more open to feedback from the community. In reviewing the proposals and listening to the presentations, I've had a really hard time connecting the dots. We have a hypothetical problem statement, hand-waving arguments, and a solution being proposed. The entire thing seems backwards and a knee-jerk reaction. This was confirmed actually Thursday at the listening session. At the end of the meeting, the board president took the mic and she said, and I quote, "I always say to Dr. Russell, where are we trying to get to? Let's do that first and let's look backwards." That's not how you develop a strategy. It's inherently biased towards what you want. This type of thought process risks implementing solutions that don't actually solve the underlying problems, and then they can create new problems that we don't even know about. I'm actually baffled that an educational system would utilize this type of thinking to develop a strategy. I appreciated the comment, though, because it's the first time that we've actually seen transparent communication for why we're here right now. I still can't figure out why, but there's an underlying agenda, and they're working their way backwards from that agenda to make it happen. They're hijacking concerns on capacity and space to justify the solution, but why now? As stated before, we know there's not going to be a space or capacity problem in 1 to 2 years, so now's the only time they can hijack that to make this system or this solution go forward. I urge the board not to entertain proposals that start with the solution and work backwards because it's extremely biased. But the proposal's at your doorstep, so we have to talk about it. The truth of the matter is I think it'll hurt PV. It's already hurt the administration. I can tell you my viewpoint has changed on that, and there's a significant lack of trust now within the community towards the administration. With aggressive nature and clear bias, this proposal, you've lost my trust that this administration will actually do what's best for all kids in PV. You held a listening session after you submitted the proposal to the board. You don't actually care what the community thinks. It will fragment our community. You'll have large areas of the district that will lose significant support for the district. Additionally, the solution's likely to be more expensive, and we'd see no cost analysis. So the financial impact is important. We'd like to see what our tax increases are expected to be. It'll hurt our families. You can listen to the session for how difficult this will make parents' lives. Single parents, 2 working parents, sick kids, kids with chronic illnesses. It's going to be really difficult. But most importantly, it'll hurt our kids. And if you don't see that, I want you to ask you to take your blinders off to the solution that you've already seen and work your way forwards. A large number of future 5th and 6th graders will have a negative school experience compared to what's offered today. Everyone will have more transitions, and it goes against the data that we see on when we should be starting kids at school. High school students should start later than elementary, and this entire proposal goes against published scientific data. I urge the board to vote no on this proposal, as it's clearly biased, and the backwards thinking is not what we should be supporting as an educational district. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Mercanti. I'm so, yes. Well, we're right in the middle of public comment.
I understand.
Mr. Saylor, and you probably are looking to have a response with regard to what I said during the question and answer. It actually wasn't a listening section. It was a community question and answer forum. And so I think it was approached in a certain way, and I stepped in to give feedback because it was specifically said that the board wasn't even present, but I was present for every single meeting. So this is not the time for me to address that. I can address that during President's report. That is not what I meant, or that was not the spirit of what I said or why I said it. So we can move forward with public comment if you want to hold your thought, if you don't mind.
I don't think board members should be talking at community meetings. I've made that very clear to Dr. Russell in the past.
And that's fine. I don't think board members should be writing op-ed articles. So we agree to disagree, and so I felt it was appropriate for me to address the community as a board member and a listening participant of the meeting. But I appreciate your commentary. Thank you. Aaron Mercanti, please correct me if I misstate your name.
Aaron Mercadante, you were close, and Trackborough. It's a hard one. I'm here tonight as a deeply concerned parent and an advocate for all students, but especially the vulnerable population. I have 2 children at South Elementary, one with special needs, and I'm urging you, in fact, I'm imploring you to reconsider this proposed restructuring of our district. I attended the February 13th meeting and the February 27th meeting, and what I heard confirmed what I feared. This plan will be detrimental to all students, particularly those who rely on stability, consistency, and specialized support. The restructuring forces students to transition schools 3 times before high school. So that means 3 times that they will have to adjust to new teachers, new buildings, and new expectations in such a short amount of time. For many students, especially those who struggle with change and transitions, this will lead to academic regressions, increased anxiety, and behavioral challenges. And now you're asking me and hundreds of other parents to just sit back and accept and be okay that our children will be forced to experience this disruption again and again. And now, and what about our children and students with IEPs and 504 plans? This realignment will severely impact special education services. Students will lose consistency in their support staff, their therapists, and their aides. These are the people that they rely on to be successful, the people they trust. And you know what? These are the people that keep them safe. How can these students thrive when they're forced to restart the process every 2 years? The best thing I can do right now is give you a real example of what happens when IEPs are disrupted. As I mentioned previously multiple times, this year my son lost 1/3 of his school year due to gross negligence. His IEP wasn't followed. He transitioned from Swanksville to South at the suggestion of his special education team for his benefit. We were reassured that no matter what school he would attend, that he'd get the same educational needs and they would be met the exact same. That simply was not true. And my son had significant educational regression and increased behavioral challenges. Lack of consistency. That's what happened. Lack of communication just between two schools. And now we're going to be doing this every 2 years. This wasn't an educational team error that they caught. It was us as parents that caught it. But what about the students whose families can't consistently check in, who can't advocate? How many kids will fall through the cracks under this plan? I feel confident in my abilities as an advocate for my child that this will never, ever happen again to him, but I shouldn't have to. What happens to all the other kids? There are so many more topics that I didn't even get into beyond special education, but this plan prioritizes administrative convenience over the well-being of our children. It's unacceptable. Our children really deserve better and more thought.
Thank you very much. Jill Heist?
I can't have that countdown start till I say my name because I timed it perfect. Jill Heist, Collegeville Borough. Tonight, I stand here urging you to reconsider the administration proposal. It disrupts our entire district, attempting to address space constraints at just 2 elementary schools without comprehensive data to support it as a viable long-term solution. We've been told this is a space issue, yet it seems other options were never seriously explored. We could redistrict Skipback Elementary. We could add temporary space to elementary schools. We could have a plan to build on 2 elementary schools if we're doing school different. Or if you want to fix the east-west thing that keeps getting brought up, then have 2 elementary schools each feed into 1 middle school and stop pitting them against each other in sporting events. But instead, we're asked to upend our district structure without data-driven justification. Imagine if we would have listened to the administration 6 years ago and closed South. Where would we be now from a space perspective? This plan makes kids transition 3 times in 4 years. It doubles their grade size way too early, and they become just another number. Teachers and administrators won't have time to build relationships before students are uprooted again and moving on to the next building. The impact on their sense of belonging and emotional well-being cannot be ignored. PV continues to tout their emphasis on well-being and wellness. It's now a special in our elementary curriculum instead of Spanish. Yet this proposal completely contradicts that mission, prioritizing administrative convenience over student success. Spring Forward is putting 5th grade back into elementary. Feedback from educators and guidance counselors who I know have reached out who work in these models in different districts are advising you against it. Last week we heard the new model would help us because our test scores have decreased, but let's be clear. Lower scores are a nationwide trend largely tied to pandemic learning disruptions. That's not a driver for this change. A study published in the Journal of Early Adolescence found that students who transition to middle school earlier in 5th and 6th grade experience greater declines in academic achievement compared to those who stay in K-5 elementary schools longer. The promise of more opportunities for students is misleading, especially in athletics. I have a son in South, East, and the high school, all 3 schools. East is already out of gym and field space, so there's no way that's going to be possible. I don't have time to get into transportation tonight. It's a major concern because of the location of West. There's research and studies that have shown that long bus rides negatively impacts children in their academic performance, physical activity, family time, and mental health, not to mention the increase in bullying and behavior issues that will happen. We need better data on the busing for sure. We don't need to restructure our entire district to improve collaboration between teachers either. Professional development days need to be leveraged more effectively for that to happen. No survey's been given to teachers to even gauge their support. We just hear their support. The proposal is purely theoretical with no supporting data to justify the drastic move. Meanwhile, we don't have other solutions that were considered. Please do not rush forward for what remains unexplored. We deserve a thorough and transparent process.
Thank you.
I'm going to finish. Ask the right questions and demand the right data. These are our students and future of PV.
Nicole Burnett? Nicole, did you want to speak? Okay. Lindsay Hayes?
Hi, good evening. Lindsay Hayes, Collegeville Borough, and I have 2 children in South Elementary in 2nd and 3rd grade. My biggest concerns are transportation and having to get them up earlier to get onto the bus. It is detrimental for children just to be up earlier when we are starting later. Also the disruption to working adults. If someone does forget something and we have to drive out to the school or for doctor's appointments, Yeah, so I am strongly against the redistricting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kim Culp?
Hi, my name is Kim Culp, and I'm a mother of 4 children in the district. I am from Collegeville Borough. So, to being respectful as much as I can, Dr. Russell has wanted this change 6 years ago when she wanted to close South, and I'm so glad we did not close South then, because where would it be now? The board then made the right decision, and I'm really hoping the board now will make the right decision. Am I worried about transportation like every other South parent? Of course. There is no way these kids are getting to West in 20-some minutes. We live on Clayhor. That ride will be horrible for these kids who are 9 and 10 years old. When West was built, our oldest son was born that year. I lived in Collegeville my whole life, and when I bought a house in Collegeville and they built West, I never expected that any of my children would ever have to be bused over there. I do understand that it is hard for parents that live in Skippack for their students to be bused, but when they bought their house in Skippack, they knew their students would be going to West. When we bought our house in Collegeville, that was never supposed to be an option. So I am also a school counselor who works at a K-4 school district in the area. When the students in my school are leaving after 4th grade, I am absolutely devastated. I do not feel like fourth graders are ready to leave an elementary school. Research shows us that 5th graders are meant to be in elementary school. You can say that the students going to a 5th and 6th grade center will be treated like elementary school students, or you will make it feel like an elementary school. That is not true. I can tell you that. I have that experience. You can say, no, we will make this elementary-like. School districts in our area even call their 5th and 6th grade center an upper elementary school. I can tell you, as someone who was in that school, has been in that school district for the last 5 years, that is not the case. Those students are treated like middle schoolers, even though we have heard here already that that is not what is going to happen. Dr. Russell keeps telling us that admin agrees with her that this is the best thing. She is their boss. This is another thing that I have experience with. So either they're saying they agree or they're not saying anything at all, but I can see that from how the admin works at my own school with their superintendent. What do the teachers think about this? Why do I keep hearing at every meeting that we want to see what the teachers say, yet there has not been a survey sent or shared with the public about what the teachers say? These teachers are with our students for 6.5 hours a day. Their experience and expertise matters when we're making these big decisions. We need to do what is best for our kids. South makes up 25% of our elementary population. These South students need to be considered in this decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kelly Carney.
Despite the laptop, I'm ill-prepared, so I'm going to try to wade my way through some of my notes that I have here. Kelly Carney, Collegeville Borough. So I see a lot of the benefits that could come from this 5, 6, 7, 8 alignment. I'm not opposed to the concept. But as mentioned in the community meeting and again tonight, it seems like it's a desired state by the administration, and now we're just kind of searching for data to support it. While I do agree that there are a number of benefits that could result from this change, there are also challenges, and I'm not sure that they're being given the proper consideration. There must be another way that we can have both improved academic outcomes for our children with a local middle school solution. The word center hits a nerve, as the building that is being proposed as a 5-6 center is the furthest thing from center in this district. This district is far from done with population growth. The airport has 50-something homes being built on it. There's homes being built off of 113. There's homes being built in Schwenksville, and there's lots of land to continue to develop here. We are up against a space problem, and space is going to continue to be a challenge for our district due to that growth. Adding 3 to 4 classrooms to each elementary school feels like a very incremental change for a very large problem that we have in our district, which is space. When closing South was on the table. It seems that no one was considering how the building space change would be used. Obviously you weren't, or you wouldn't have considered closing it. And I don't understand how that's possible. I'm not in education. I work in a different profession, but I would imagine that there is some foresight into how our education system changes. And this isn't something that changed overnight. And within 5 years, all of a sudden, we were quickly out of space in our buildings. And I don't understand how that's possible. How do we not have that foresight? What are we missing now? What are we not considering now that we're going to need in another 5 years? We pointed to space as the issue in the classrooms. There's a mention of a decline in the scores for 5 to 8. As mentioned by a parent in the community meeting, these are the COVID years. How do these scores compare to other peer districts? What other data points are we considering? Have our scores been improving in other grade levels? Is this just a COVID issue? Are we rushing to provide a solution where there isn't actually a problem? Are all of the top districts in districts in PA have our 6 to 8 middle school model now? Is it the model, or is it the curriculum, or some other challenge that's holding us back? This whole narrative 1 PV is silly. I heard during the district meeting, the last board meeting, that there's a concern about opportunities not being the same across West and East. We need to fix that, but we don't need to fix that at the expense of the young children in our community. That is just ridiculous. I've got more to say, so I'll be back up here at the end of the meeting. I thank you for your time.
Very much. Kate Trabalka.
Hi, I'm Kate Trabalka. I'm in Collegeville Borough. Residing in Collegeville Crossing, my main objection to the realignment plan is and will always be the transportation issue. My daughter is in 3rd grade and she gets car sick. When she went on the school trip last year, we gave her Dramamine in the morning due to how far they had to travel on the school bus. I'm anxiously wondering how she will handle being stuck on a school bus for around 45 minutes every morning and again in the afternoon. I worry I'm going to have to give her Dramamine in the morning regularly, and I don't know what I'm going to do on the way home. I worry that she'll go from being a great student who loves going to school to being fearful and not wanting to go. I worry that if she gets sick, she could be bullied for it. The alternatives for kids with health issues are either a separate bus or having a nurse on board. First of all, I doubt that car sickness is something that would warrant her to have special accommodations. Regardless, the idea of separating kids out for a health issue is horrendous and wrong, and also taxpayers should not have to pay the additional cost for nurses. Despite my strong personal feelings about transportation, this plan would be easier to swallow with more information and data. At this point, the administration has not yet proved with data that this plan is beneficial to all of our kids. There has been very limited statistical information. It is very difficult to find, and some numbers from one document to another don't match. This is a huge change for our community, and conflicting data is a problem. I urge the board to demand the statistical and data-driven support to prove, number 1, that there is a problem, number 2, that this is the best and most cost-effective solution. Oh, I don't want to do that. Do I get a pause? That means that every other option should be exhausted. Maybe working with some of the dedicated parents here tonight, we can come up with a solution that's effective and will help all the problems once it has been clearly defined with data. As I mentioned, I will always hate this plan for personal reasons, but I can tell you that if the administration provided all the data, could prove that this was an effective solution to a real problem, and did so transparently, you wouldn't have all of us here. I want to end with a comparison. I commute to Chadds Ford twice a week, and when I tell people that, they're usually like, ugh, that's really far. It's about 48 minutes from my house. I bring this up because this gives us an idea of how long this ride will potentially be for our kids. It's probably only about 5 to 10 minutes further than the bus ride's gonna be on a lot of these days. If I told you that I was planning on sending your 5th grader to Chadds Ford every day, how would you feel? I think a lot of you have older kids and they're not going to be dealing with this, so I really urge you, I implore you to think about how your kids were like when they were in 5th grade. Would you want them to be on the car with other kids for this long? I seriously hope that you do not rush to move this forward. Please get the information, get the data, make sure it makes sense, and then make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the remaining folks that signed in, I'm not sure, so I'll give you an opportunity and then I'll open the floor. So Brad Boston. Candace Richards. Matt Conti? Val? Drury? You said no. Never mind. Alana Stanziano, I'm sorry. And Megan Jones. Wonderful. I open the floor for anyone else that may be interested in a public comment. All right. So that will close public comment. And we move on to section 2, reports and presentations. We do not have any students with us for student liaisons report this evening. 2.02 is president's report. I will just simply say thank you all for coming out. It's actually very nice to have community members here at board meetings to not only listen to the information firsthand, but also have an opportunity to speak. Just for the record and for edification, I did feel as though I needed to step in and say something at the end of the last community meeting. I have attended all the community meetings, and the purpose of me making a comment was not to pontificate or give my own personal opinion. It was simply to reassure those that took the time to come out to meetings that they are indeed heard. Every email is read, and whether or not there is a response to an email, it does not mean that the email was not received. I do know that other emails from board members individually do give opinions about what positions are. I did not state my position during the meetings, any of them. And last week's meeting was, in my opinion, very emotion-filled and very hard to sit and watch dedicated professionals be what I would venture, I would venture almost attacked. And so I felt as though I needed to step in on behalf of those that we entrust our children to just basically reassure that you are heard. And at the same time, our administrators are working very hard in the best interest of our children. So that was the only position that I stated. So that's all I have to say for the president's report, but just for the record, that was the reason that I spoke. So now we move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Russell, we are all waiting with bated breath here.
Thank you, Ms. White. So this evening, we will again try and capture some of what's been presented in our community meetings, and we have some different speakers sharing some of their views and some of the information that's been communicated in an effort to make sure all individuals around the table have the same information. And certainly look forward to your questions and comments. Before we get to the proposed grade level realignment, a couple of other things. So,
here.
Something's going on.
Right.
Something's going on. How's that? All right. We're here. Thank you. We're hearing some buzzing, so I'm not sure what's happening. It's rare that I'm told I don't have a big mouth or a loud voice, so but let's make sure everybody can hear. So I often start my reports grounding us in our mission and what it is we are about, as well as our shared beliefs and our goals, where we are focusing as a district academically. As I transition, I'd like to mention a few weekend events, some really positive news from the weekend before we move on to that proposed grade level realignment conversation. So first off, Friday evening, there was a Celebrating Black History Month event here at the high school with lots of individuals in attendance and great food. So it was really nice. There was a choir from a local school up in Pottstown that sang beautifully, and lots of nice socialization among the individuals in attendance. We had staff there, we had lots of students there, we had administration there, and kudos to Mrs. Janine Smith. She is in the top picture on the left. She organized the event, and it was really nice, and the students really enjoyed it. Then we also had the musical performed by Middle School East, and this was really fantastic. The dancing and the extent to which our students went in performing The Descendants was really impressive, and it was really an enjoyable show. The students did a great job. So kudos, Mr. DeAndrea, Ms. Harris, and your staff that led this event. Really a nice job. And then Friday night, too, our girls' basketball team was down at St. Joe's, and they took the district championship for the 3rd year in a row. So congratulations to our girls' team. They will move on to state playoffs now, and I think they begin this Friday evening. Great job. And then lastly, we had a foundation dodgeball tournament. This is an annual event. This year there were 93 teams, the most ever, 788 players that filled both of our gyms, and the foundation raised a lot of money. If you're interested, there's a little clip that CBS News ran, NBC ran. Really nice article, and it was an interview with Cindy Hickey, who plays a big part in helping to organize the dodgeball tournament. So really nicely done, and we are thankful to the foundation for all that they do for our students and our schools.
On this Friday night, students in Montgomery County were at school trying to knock each other out. It was a dodgeball tournament that brought kids from kindergarten all the way through high school together, and their goal, their ultimate goal, to make a difference in the community.
That's my shoe!
In this mad dash to the dodgeballs, every step counts. And strategy is the name of the game.
We usually just go for the best guy, throw a bunch of balls at him, hope we get him out. We usually aim for the feet. Yeah.
On this battleground, war paint and camouflage seem to set the tone for the competition among 102 teams. Most are students in the Perkiomen Valley School District. And while they may want to beat their classmates more than anything, they're actually here to benefit each other.
It's to raise money to enrich and enhance the education of the kids in our district. There's always budget cuts and things that we want for our kids that aren't necessarily available in the budget. So we raise money so the teachers can dance for new and innovative programs, and we fund that.
So I'm going to stop it there, but just to give a shout out. To give a shout out to our foundation. This is a big event to organize every year. Lots of community comes out and participates, and it was another successful event. And I do apologize for the issues we're having with sound. That's difficult to hear. So let's move on. And again, I will review. There are space constraints in 3 of our 4 elementary schools, and our elementary principals are here this evening and can narrate some of that if it would be helpful. I'm going to try and provide some additional background. In addition, as I've mentioned, the needs of the students coming into our schools are becoming more diverse. They continue to evolve. And with some of the programs and services that we provide come additional resources with also needs for space. So I mentioned that not only is this a space issue, but also because of the challenges around space, there are difficulties delivering these programs and services in the ways that we believe are best for students. Hence the proposal to move to that 5-6, 7-8 alignment, which administration believes could actually serve students more effectively, better. This slide is one that Mr. Weaver shows in each of his finance committee meeting agendas, and it's an enrollment projection based on the 9-year cohort. It's in his slides tonight. It's in the slides every month, and it projects out using a particular formula called the 9-year cohort model, how our enrollments are trending. They are predicted based on this model to trend downward. We had a planning commission study done in 2017, and the study is public and it's available via this link. It's attached in board docs, May 17. It helps us to know how the Planning Commission considers or projects out enrollment. They consider birth rates, and they consider economic conditions or indicators, construction that might be happening. According to this model, you see some slight increases. They are updating these data, nothing significant. And when we see a decrease or an increase, they're typically sprinkled across several grades. They're not concentrated in one grade. So this is another example of a set of projections that we have available and that we look to. Here are actual data, real-time data, indicating how enrollments have trended. For the most part, trending downward, but you see ups and downs from 2020 to 24. In a third model that was published by architects that, again, this is available to the public. This is a study that was done in 2017. For the elementary schools, you see a general trending downward, and now here you're seeing some sort of stagnant actions, maybe a slight increase. And over here, some explanation about the capacity and how our buildings are currently used. And you see for each of the 4 elementary schools, according to this is an architectural firm that completed this study, this analysis. They looked at the number of kindergarten classrooms, which at the time were half day, the number of regular ed, the number of special ed, the number of IU classrooms. Sometimes we have intermediate unit classrooms in our buildings. They use some of the space at times when we can afford that as part of a partnership, our special areas, etc. On this slide, these numbers have been updated. So in the red, you see what's happening now. This is real-time current data. So we've increased the number of kindergarten classrooms in 3 of the 4 buildings, and we've increased our special education classrooms, which is what you see across the special ed line. And again, it is about the diverse and evolving needs of our students and programming for these students in ways that we believe meet their needs, address their strengths. Now, some of the explanation that's been provided in the GKO, the architectural study, when they figure out building capacities, they look at the upper end of class size recommendations. So our board, as part of Policy 126, which I'll show you in a minute because that had raised some questions. What's Policy 126? Just some clarity around Policy 126 and class size recommendations. We don't typically go to the maximum or the upper end of that range, and in fact, focus pretty diligently on keeping class sizes lower as opposed to higher. So when this capacity study was completed, they went to the upper end, and you'll see that in the explanation. I have here a screenshot of a current enrollment report. This is posted tonight in the board agenda, section 4. Every month the board presents, as part of the agenda, an enrollment report. So you can see, if you look at the class sizes in each of the elementary schools, except for grade 5, they are less than the 23 on average reported in the study. That's recognized. That may not be what you do as a district, but this is how we're calculating capacities. So some explanation there. Middle level enrollments are trending downward, little bit of up and down at West. Similar graphs included in the GKO study. Enrollment is trended downward, and then they talk about capacity usage, how they calculated the capacity of each building. They calculate that, for example, in our middle schools, East has the capacity to host 1,000 students, 1,015 actually, and West 899. We would not want to put that many students in either of those schools. Again, they're looking at the upper end of class size recommendations. Here's the middle school information that was pulled out as a screenshot. 5th and 6th grades have a class size recommendation range that goes from 23 to 27, 7th and 8th, 25 to 30. We try hard not to put 30 kids in a classroom. Sometimes that happens with math in particular, as we're moving students to meet high achieving or acceleration needs, but we try really hard not to put 30 students, really to go above 25. That's our effort. But class size recommendations say that that may happen. This is the recommended range. So some information about what's actually happening at the middle school right now appears in this enrollment report screenshot. And lastly, this is Policy 126 before I turn it over to some of our administrators. This is an example of a policy that provides guidance to administration and to the board. So they've afforded administration some flexibility. The policy language helps guide class sizes. So in kindergarten through grade 2, we aim for 18 to 21 students, the lowest in the class size recommendations that you will see, because we want to support our youngest learners. Grades 3 and 4, you'll see an increase. Grades 5 and 6, even more. But again, we don't aim for 27 students in our 5th grade classes, nor do we aim for 28 in 7th and 8th grade. So this policy was updated in 22 and looks a little different from what the GKO study I just shared presented. So just some background on some of the enrollment trending, the capacity numbers, the capacity data, and again, what's real-time happening in elementary schools. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Marsh. He'll start. He'll share a little bit with you, board, about some of the thought processes and the considerations for students, and then we'll go through a couple of other administrators. And certainly, I'm happy to take questions because this is a special topic.
Good evening, members of the board. It's good to see you all and be here, and really appreciate the opportunity to start off the building level administrators in our facility task force presentation. Dr. Russell just went through those numbers, and this slide is really what has me excited, in the sense of, if you think back, and we opened West in 2004, the fall of 2004, and I was fortunate enough to be here at the time, and Dr. Russell and I actually, as administrators, opened that building together. And when we opened that building, the concerns that existed at that time, especially out of Skipback, were the distance to get up to West, and what could we actually do in a space that was so remote. Now, we're reminded that that was the parcel of land that was open in the district at the time. There was a front page display on the Philadelphia Inquirer at the time with our then superintendent, Dr. Fear, about how hard it was to find space in the district. We all know, and I think this was said the other night in jest, we all know we're not going to put West on wheels and move it. But I will say this, when you look at this slide and you look at all the things that are listed there, the programming to meet the academic needs, the improved transitions, the adequate space, the targeted resources, the increased collaboration, the potential for new and different opportunities, and the acceleration. You put those 5th and 6th graders together, my experience speaks to this. You put 5th and 6th graders together and you remove the element of 7th and 8th graders who are at a different stage, a very different stage in their young adolescent development. And you put these students together in a facility like Middle School West. And I just get really excited about what you can do. When we opened that building, we had 512 students. West is now sitting, to my understanding, with 506. There is one of my favorite space in the whole district is that auditorium. You also have a gymnasium. Imagine our 5th graders putting on musicals. Our 5th and 6th graders putting on their own concerts. Us leveraging those spaces in FCS. Us thinking about and tapping into the expertise of our teachers and saying to them, this is the setup. How can we best take these ideas and run with it? That was the magic that we were able to develop when we opened that middle school in 2004, and I fully believe we can find that again. If we want to go to the next slide, Dr. Russell, putting 5th through 8th graders together developmentally, we knew, and I told this story, but I think it's a very stark example. You know, we started when we opened West to invite 6th graders to the dance, and what we found is that there was just not a readiness on their part to partake. They were playing tag during the first dance, and 8th graders were really upset. That was something I look at somebody who may recall this, that's something that Ken Donahue, the same guy who taught me never leave the office without your jacket on, that guy, would never have them there. And we learned that, wow, we had to bridge that gap for our 6th graders. If you put 5th graders in that mix, first of all, we don't come together as a class. I think that's very important. And we put them in a position where they can potentially be influenced by those older kids. And on the positive side, and Mr. DeAndre, I don't want to take his speaking points. He's going to talk 7th and 8th grade. You put the 7th and 8th graders on this campus and get them access here potentially as they're ready. You've done a lot to serve our students. So we've said that, the education has changed. And I look at my time when we opened that middle school until now, I look at the number of counselors we've added. I look at the psychologists we added, the expansion of our ELS program, bringing back special education classes into the district. We've changed our game to meet the changing needs of kids. That's how we land in this situation. But just like in '04, it was a space situation. And we have an opportunity, I think, to make us a lot better as a district by getting these kids together in 5th grade. We have to overcome concerns. We certainly do. But I come to you as someone, and I don't generally, you guys know me, or sorry, you ladies and gentlemen, most of you know me very well. I'm not one to speak about myself very often. I've been doing this for a long time at all the levels. Dr. Sachs has been doing this a long time at all the levels. We believe in this because we've seen how this can positively impact our kids. So truly, really appreciate the opportunity. Mr. DeAndre is going to walk us through 7th and 8th grade, and then we'll be able to answer any questions you have as we go through the rest of the presentation. So leave you with that around these slides, and I offer Mr. DeAndre up to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Stanson-Marsh. Good evening, everybody. I will talk about, Mr. Stanson-Marsh covered a lot of the talking points that are on these next two slides, the impact at East, or at the 5-6 center and the current West building, and then at East, the projected 7-8 building. So you see the total projected enrollment would be 673, and right now we're at about 508, did you say, at West, 506? So the facility impact overall, and this is true for the 7-8 building, the classroom space that we currently use for gen ed, for special area classes, for special ed classes, we can maintain all of those designated spaces. So we can make the most efficient, effective use of the space that we do have available currently at the West building and at the East building. So that was really important for me as we sat down and started looking at the impact overall at these middle level buildings. I wanted to make sure that our special ed's designated spaces were maintained and we weren't combining spaces and we still had space for our service providers. So that part is maintained across both buildings, and we can maintain our class size recommendations, stay at the current level we're currently at. So that speaks a little bit to where we are with space in these buildings, and adding these extra students in, we still maintain our current level of programming, which is something that's important to consider, I think. So instructional opportunities for the 5-6 building, we're looking to increase instructional time for ELA and math and for science. There's lots of different ways to look at scheduling, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds with that because that's a whole other conversation. But it's our job as administrators to maximize the space and the time we have in the schedule for increased instructional opportunities. And as the STEEL standards are upon us with science curriculum and STEM, it's our obligation to find those places in the schedule where can we increase opportunities there. So that's a positive that would come out of a realignment in this way, increasing those opportunities for 5th and 6th graders. We maintain the team structure. We would look at, for an intermediate building, you're looking at, right now our 5th graders in most cases have 3 core teachers and one teacher of math, or in some cases 2 teachers teaching math and science, or 2 teachers and another 2 teachers teaching English and social studies. So we would kind of maintain that smaller team structure before they get to the middle level where they have teams of 4 core teachers. And in terms of the school community, we can really increase club opportunities, extracurricular opportunities for our 5th and 6th graders, especially our 5th graders. We can add recess into the schedule. I can speak directly to this as we're taking our kids outside at the end of lunch. Our 6th graders really benefit from that time outside and that recess, so adding that back into the schedule. So we have more of a true intermediate building for our 5th and 6th graders. There are benefits to that. And again, we have mentioned this idea of this inclusive culture and community, bringing everyone together in one building. For the East building for 7-8, again, same thing. We maintain those designated spaces for all of our core special ed classrooms. And I'll speak to the instructional opportunities a little bit here. And I spoke about this at the community meeting on Thursday. And this is important for me as an instructional leader. Always striving for how can we have the most effective collaborative teacher teams possible. I referred in the education world, in the research world around education, this is known as collective teacher efficacy. It's the belief of your team of teachers and educators that they can positively impact outcomes for kids. And more than that, it's also their ability to do that. So to have high functioning PLC teams, collaborative teams in the buildings, there are certain structures that have to be in place to support that. And we can do that. We can reimagine this opportunity right now to reimagine how we structure our teacher teams to really positively impact outcomes for kids. Collective teacher efficacy is one of the most effective strategies that you can support for improving outcomes for kids. We can strive to maintain our current access for PIAA athletics and extracurriculars. That's a goal moving into this, not decreasing opportunities for kids with PIAA activities in 7th and 8th grade, but maintaining or increasing them. And then, again, that idea of the inclusive school culture and community. I spoke on Thursday also about my background as a PV grad. When I went to the middle school at the old Trap building, we were joining, there were only 2 elementary schools at the time, and we joined with North. And we thought the North kids were animals. We didn't know them, but that was the perception that we had, and that was kind of silly, right? So with 4 elementary schools now, we have these little pockets in our community, and we have a true opportunity here to bring our pocket communities together into one community at an earlier stage in their development. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about daily schedules here, and you can see here the projected start times. This is a first take at this, I think. The high school time and middle school and east, the 7-8 building, we sort of maintain those start and end times. The West Intermediate schedule looking to start school at 8:15 and would end at 2:45, and then the elementary grades 8:40 to 3:10, trying to stagger those start and end times based on the bus tiers that are projected. The next 2 slides.
I don't know that you have to go into too much detail here, Mr. DeAndrea. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we did try to present for the board and individuals in the community who are viewing a current schedule for 5th grade and a hypothetical, as well as a current 6th grade and hypothetical. There were questions about these, so we wanted to provide some possibilities based on how we're operating now and how we see improvements that could be had. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
The only thing I'll add here is that, as it's noted at the bottom of this schedule, it's really important that this stage, when we talk about schedules, again, we can do anything with schedules. It's important that we're collaborating with our staff and our teachers in this next step, and that can be that can be a process that we really need to pay attention to and give it the time that it's due. But these are possibilities.
Thank you, Mr. DeAndrea.
Can these slides be added so the board has access to them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Good evening, everyone. So we heard loud and clear about the transportation challenges. I want to start off by saying that's one of the items that we identified very early in the process that needs extra attention. We've been working really hard to reduce the ride times and also bring more efficiencies to these to the bus rides. Dr. Russell, next slide. So this is the map of our current 3rd and 4th graders who will transition to 5, 6 Center at West in a couple of years. As you can clearly see, those circled areas are the neighborhoods that are farthest from West. Working closely with the transportation company STA, we devised routes for these farthest neighborhoods, and these routes were designed in such a way that we were going to use very minimal number of stops, maybe 7 or 8 stops, and also using smaller buses, maybe a 30-seater bus. Even on a 30-seater bus, we were going to board only about 20 students. Let's just say that there's about 2 or 3 students in each stop. By the time that the bus gets to the 7th or 8th stop, the bus already has 20 students and then the bus is full. So that's how we designed these routes to have a minimal number of stops and smaller buses. So not only we designed these routes, but we also drove these routes multiple times, including videotaping these routes to analyze the traffic, other patterns like how long does the light stay on red or green, how easy or difficult is it to make a right or left turn. So to analyze all these patterns, we drove these routes multiple times, and our task force members and board members also rode the school bus with us on a few occasions from Collegeville and Skipack. So what we found, these were our findings. Dr. Russell, if you go to the next slide. So these were our findings for a Collegeville route. Again, those timings are a little different because we were trying to come up, we were trying to arrive at a bell schedule. So we start off these routes at 7:20 on some days, and then when we came closer to determining the bell schedule, then we switched to 750, which would align closely to our bell schedules. So anyways, so for the Collegeville route, the farthest neighborhood is the Collegeville crossings. We had a few stops there. Went across from 29, went to the Collegeville Glen, had a few stops there. So the bus driver stopped at each of those stops for maybe 30 seconds to a minute, simulating picking up a student and heading over to west. The bus driver did mention that depending on the number of students and whether the students are ready to board the bus or not, the stop times might be longer or shorter. So in neighborhoods where there are 7 or 8 students per stop, the bus is going to make only like 3 or 4 stops because the 20 students are going to be boarded in those 3 or 4 stops. So it might be a minute or longer stop, but there's only 3 or 4 stops in that route. So we did the same thing in the afternoon, rode the same route from west back to these Collegeville neighborhoods. On an average, it's about 35 minutes is what that route took. We took some alternate routes like going down Clayhor, making a right onto 113, and then again making a left onto 29. We tried going down Township Line to, Ridgepike to Township Line to Game Farm to 29. So we tried multiple routes, but we concluded that taking 29 all the way is the most efficient way to get to west from Collegeville, because the traffic both during in the mornings and the afternoon is in the opposite direction. There's very minimal traffic going toward in the direction that you're heading. So that we concluded that that would be the most efficient way to get to west from Collegeville. So Dr. we go to the next slide. We did something similar to Skipack as well. The farthest point in Skipack is by the Buster Road in Harleysville. So we had a few stops there, then drove to the Biltmore Estates, came back onto 73, drove to Skipack, then onto 29, and then to west. So we did notice there was traffic in Skipack on 73, but once we got to 29, it was a much more smoother ride. And we did the same thing in the afternoon. So we found that consistently the afternoon ride was about 8 to 10 minutes longer than the morning ride. So that's again 30-35 minutes is what we found even for the Skipack route. Let's go to the next slide. So here's a few other transportation items to consider. So our threshold for ride times is 45 minutes. So if you look at our mock-up ride times, right, even if we were to add another 10 more minutes to our mock-up ride times, based on this data, we are confident that we're able to transport students from the farthest end of the district to west and still be within that threshold. That's what the data shows us. And also, one of the things about this multi-tier transportation model is it provides efficiency by providing buses from one tier available to the other tier. But for the west building, we are planning to use a dedicated fleet, so they are not sharing the buses with other buildings, and it's not introducing any more delays. So we're trying to use a dedicated fleet for west to minimize the ride times. Again, using a smaller bus, maybe a 30-seater, where necessary, going to the farthest end of the districts. Coming back to the, coming back to the main campus here, with a 7-8 center is projected to have 120 or so more students than what current East enrollment is, while high school enrollment is projected to go down by about 75 students. So the net is about 45 students more, which again, we don't anticipate any significant traffic patterns or needing additional buses in the campus. So the campus here is going to remain as is. And also the high school used to have 2,000 plus students, middle school East used to have about 1,000 plus students. So we handled higher traffic in the past, and we can use the same protocols if needed. Again, with this multi-tier, I don't want to use the word 3-tier. So this multi-tier system, it is projected to bring more efficiency. It's because it's going to be, it's going to have reduced ride times because there's going to be fewer stops because there's going to be more buses available for each of those tiers. So again, for transporting students with medical needs, the district always follows the doctor's written orders, whether it being a specialized van or having a trained professional who's able to, or EpiPen or other medical devices. We always follow the doctor's order, and also when an IEP or a 504 plan is developed, an individualized transportation plan is developed as well, which is what the district and STA follows. So those would be my transportation. Thank you.
Mr. Ganesh. So we have Mrs. Evans who will speak very briefly about special ed, that overview that was provided without quite the level of detail, but just an overview of considerations as part of the transition.
Good evening. If you want more detail, the January 27th meeting slides have more detail for each of these topics. So when we had our family meetings in the last month with the special education team, we came up with some considerations that we might need to look at for transitions for special education students in particular. So they're focused on communication, instruction, and social emotional supports. And I was just going to give a quick example of each. So for communication, making sure we have that checklist for transitions. So one case manager to another, make sure we're the sending and receiving case managers are in communication. For instruction, some students will need specific instruction for organizational skills, practicing locks on lockers, and just being proactive and looking to those transition skills that students might need. And for social emotional supports, making sure we have those springtime visits and providing facilitated levels of tours for some of our students, whether they're guided, one-to-one, sensory-friendly tours, etc. So, like I said, more detail in the slides from the other day, but just know that in response to those meetings, we did take some time to think about how we could move forward with that if we do move forward.
And I'll speak briefly about the transition slides for our all students that we focus on, really starting around April each spring. These transition activities really go all spring into the summer. And as we think about the transition for our students that would be going to a 5, 6, or a 7, 8 building, in the months before school lets out, our internal teams are meeting, they're collaborating, and we're making an effort to talk about every child and make sure that we know their names coming into the new buildings. The consideration that we want to think about for these transitions, bringing the kids together sooner in the summer. So in June, after school lets out, the 5, 6 building and the 7, 8 building would each have activities that bring the students together that have not been together in these buildings before. And then in August, we have our typical tours. We could schedule individual tours for families, and we can have our normal building activities where parents come in with kids, and we have that kickoff event right before school starts, which is often known as the parent orientation night. And similar information here on the 5, 6 slide.
Thank you, Mr. DeAndrea. And lastly, we have incorporated some of the benefits that principals believe would exist for students K-4 in the elementary schools were 5 to be moved out. So some things that we have touched upon before. This slide appears as part of the deck. And next steps, if we transition there, first of all, I would like to clarify for the board and the community present tonight, there was a reference to communication from the school board. The school board has not communicated any of this. That is administration. So when you wonder about communication, for those that may be wondering, please know those communications that you receive or are sent out are from administration and not our board. So I would encourage any follow-up questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions. You can always share comments with the board, but I don't want individuals to leave here thinking that the board wrote those newsletters or the board didn't do something with communication. That is strictly administration. I wanted to clarify that. And it's clear to me that individuals from our South community are upset, and that never feels good. So, as Mr. Marsh mentioned, we would like to figure out how we might work through whatever we end up doing as a district. However, as an administrative team, we feel strongly there are positive opportunities and outcomes for our students in this 5, 6, 7, 8 alignment. And they've been laid out. They're more qualitative. They are not the quantitative data that some are looking for. They are qualitative based on our experiences. We believe this would support what's happening in the elementary schools, afford them the space, and then provide wonderful opportunities, meaningful opportunities with improved outcomes for 5, 6, and 7, 8, and bring the students together sooner as opposed to later. Somebody asked the other night about sustainability. So if the board were to approve this recommendation of the administration, how long could we sustain it? And based on the information right now, we believe that at least 10 years, we are updating our enrollment projections right now, but our principals have gone out at the middle level to almost 15 years based upon what we know today of trending. So we believe that the model is sustainable, and they can share some details. They have talked about that as well. My final closing remarks to the board are to invite you to ask questions or request additional information of administration. We are waiting for that Planning Commission updated study to be completed. What else would you like the administration to consider as we look to moving something forward in an effort to support what's happening and really not happening in the ways we believe it should be at the elementary level, in the elementary buildings?
Thank you, Dr. Russell. So I guess we'll move at this point then to open the board table for questions and comments. I will start off, if you don't mind, just if you could reiterate when we would expect the Planning Commission response back, and then if you foresee in your dialogue amongst Cabinet any surprises in their response.
We are really trying to encourage the Planning Commission to get that to us sooner rather than later. I would love to have it in time for the April board meeting. I don't know. I've been working with Mr. Weaver to in turn work with them. So we don't have a hard and fast date yet, but we are working with the individual who leads that work.
And what about like surprises, thoughts there, Mr. Weaver?
I'm unaware of any surprises. Keep in mind that when we have new building construction, we don't know who's going to move in those.
Right.
We do know that there are some significant constructions, for instance, in Perkiomen Township, that they're considering that is age restricted. So for us, that's all critical information that comes from this Montgomery County Planning Commission. And with that information comes all kinds of ratios that they apply to new homes, to townhomes, all of that kind of stuff that help us to develop those 5 and 10 year future plans or solidify our thoughts. But right now there's nothing out there, no chunk of land for 350 homes.
Okay.
Something of which we went through at the beginning, the early 2000s, when we had 300 new students every year for 3 straight years.
Different than that, okay. Yeah, I mean, with age restriction, obviously that adds to our tax base, but not to our building count.
Business office, we like that because they don't bring children, yes.
Jim. Okay, I open the floor to the board. Questions, go ahead, Dr. Weston.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all of the information that's been shared with the board so far. I did participate in two of the bus runs, one going out to West and one coming back from West to Collegeville Crossing. I was surprised at the amount of time it took. I thought it would be another like a 45 or 50 minute transportation time. It turned out to be much less than that. I was a little surprised at that. So that addresses part of my concern on that. I know this was one of my big questions when it came up when we first started talking about this. I know when I had kids, if I still had kids living in Collegeville Crossing, I would be concerned about this as well. One thing that I haven't really heard addressed, and I think really needs to be taken seriously, is the issue of start times. It came up a couple times tonight. I brought it up in conversation with you. It's come up several times over the last couple of years, and I don't know that it's something we've ever really taken seriously. I think it really does need to be addressed, and as long as we are looking at this kind of a change, I think this needs to be part of the discussion. Do we think of this as something that seriously needs to be considered? I think we do. And if so, how are we going to move forward with it? I know you've said that's maybe a conversation for a different committee, a different meeting. I think it needs to be part of this conversation as well. And I just hope that we are able to kind of bring that into the conversation as we're making the continuing these discussions, coming towards making a decision on this.
If I may, thank you, Dr. Weston, and I appreciate your advocacy for that. There is research that supports that older students, our older adolescents, benefit from later start times, and we looked at that research before the pandemic and then kind of hit pause on that. What I have suggested in response is that we bring this topic up at the Wellness Committee and the Education Committee of the whole, and we reignite the conversation and the discussion based on some of the current research and what we know some schools around us, some districts around us are doing and have done. I am certainly open to having conversations and talking about some of the dominoes that fall when we do shift around school start times. I will also add that with the Viking Zone and the proposal that is being trialed at the high school right now, high school students, if this were to be approved and implemented next year, would not need to be in their seat until 8:05 to start the day. Right now, that's 7:50. Now, that's a couple of ifs. There's some what ifs there. However, that's something I also want to include in our conversations, and the board will hear from Dr. Fuller on how this trial goes, and then hopefully will approve or we will adjust as needed moving forward. But that too should be a part of the conversation. But I appreciate it and we will include it on the upcoming agendas.
Mr. Fountain?
I had a couple of questions about the transportation. When you were talking about transportation, you'd said something about the fact that there was going to be a dedicated fleet for the students going to West. My concern is that we've had interesting backgrounds with STA and having drivers and having adequate buses and that kind of thing. What's the chances of them not having enough drivers for those smaller buses? Because if you're talking a 30-passenger bus and only 7 stops, that's going to take a lot of buses. The other piece of that is that when you talked about the drive that you took over there, one of the things that you talked about as far as the transportation, it seemed like more people were coming when you were going this way. If you're adding that many students into West, all going at the same time, what about parent transportation? So you're going to jump the number of vehicles up going the same direction you're going. So just a couple of questions like that.
All right, let me start with the number of bus drivers and the dedicated fleet. So with the we had the conversation with STA even this morning or this afternoon, trying to work out the number of school buses that would be needed. And again, based on these conversations are still preliminary, based on the numbers and evaluations that we are doing, we are coming to a conclusion that due to this multi-tiered system where the buses in one tier are available to the other tiers, for example, the buses that's coming to the 7-8 Center and East, if this process moves forward, the buses that will be coming to 7-8 Center and High School and East will be available to the elementary. So there's no need for a dedicated bus at the elementary level. So you're looking at only buses needing for the main campus, and then based on the West enrollment, we are projecting about 18 to 20 buses needing for the West campus to transport those 600 some students. So that is what our calculation projects, and that would mean we have about 104 buses right now. That would mean, again, initial projections, that we would be needing fewer buses. Even with this dedicated fleet, we'll be needing fewer buses than our current model.
Can you do those numbers again?
So based on I'll just give you numbers from today, this afternoon. So we have about 2,300, 2,400 students between, we're projecting 2,300 and 2,400 students between high school and 7-8 Center if this process goes forward, right? It's about 2,300, 23 something, right? And currently, excluding the special ed buses, the campus has about 31 buses for the high school and the East. So even if you had to go and add about 15 or 20 more buses, so we were assuming or we were calculating that the 7-8 Center and the high school would have about 50 to 55 buses.
50?
Yeah, 50.
Yep.
To 50 to 55 buses in total. That includes special ed transportation, or maybe a little bit more including special ed. That would leave about 40 plus buses from our current fleet. We have about 104 buses that's currently running. That leave about 40 plus buses in our current fleet that would be available for West, non-pub transportation, stuff like that. So by having this dedicated fleet in the afternoon, this dedicated fleet can do the athletic runs, like once the evening runs are over. So these buses would be available for the athletic runs and stuff like that. So that's how we are. Again, these are very preliminary projections, but based on the projections, based on the conversations we've been having, given with transportation, so our numbers seems like we'll be needing fewer buses with this model than what we currently have.
Is this unique or some? So for instance, is the bus going to be doing a high school drop and then going to go do a west drop?
No, the high school drop, all the high school drop buses would then go to the elementary because they already...
Average about 17 kids on a bus. They're all smaller buses and for the west drop.
No. The smaller buses are only for the farthest, for example, the Schwanksville, right? Dr. Ross, we're going to go back to my the map.
But there's going to be roughly around 700 kids at west.
Right. So if you
40
look at...
buses would be 17 kids on a bus.
No. We don't need 40 buses. So if you look at the, those data points there, they're different colors based on different elementaries. So if you look at the ones in gray, that's evergreen. So that could accommodate a 72-seater. The ones in Schwanksville, that's in yellow, that can accommodate a 72-seater. There's no need for smaller buses in those areas. You would need a smaller bus only for those ones in the Collegeville area, which is like dark brown, and then the Skip-Pack, part of Skip-Pack, which is orange. So like half of Skip-Pack can still get on a 72-seater, where only parts of Skip-Pack, parts of Collegeville would need those smaller cadet buses, which is like 20 to 30 seats.
What's the largest bus that would go from Collegeville to west?
I mean, we have a 72 and a 79-seater, but we can, probably a 72-seater is probably what would go from Collegeville to west. Again, we're talking about only for the 5th and 6th grade students.
Mr. Ganesh. I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
No.
Okay. The area that's circled right now, that's part of Skip-Pack, that travels to west, currently our students are making that trip.
Yes, they are.
For 3 years of their career, they make that trip.
Yes.
What bus equipment do we use for them currently? Are they on a large bus or are they on a smaller bus?
I think, if I remember this correctly, they're on the bus number 195, which is a larger 72-seater, and that does take little more than our threshold.
Threshold of time or?
Sorry.
Your threshold of time?
Yeah, 45 minutes. It takes, that bus is one of the buses that is at the threshold a little more than 45 minutes.
Would you be interested, or would it be possible then, if instead of deploying the large bus for these students that are already making this run, is there a reason why we couldn't test this out and send a couple of smaller buses to the children that are on this route and see if the theory holds?
We could certainly try that.
I understand it's technically
right. So
doing their
yeah,
run, but we have time.
There's a couple of not a concern. There's a couple of things that we need to work through. So based on the current fleet that STA has, they have about 30 cadet buses. Not everything is a 30-seater. A cadet is about 20 to 30 seats. They have about 30 buses. Not all of them are operational, and some of them run on special needs. So we got to figure out if there are any free available buses, which this is something certainly we can explore.
You could take one of those routes, right, and split it up into 2 or 3 buses.
Exactly. So we would need
test the theory.
Right. We would need 3 cadet buses to split the 72-seater into split that into 2 or 3 buses. Yes, it is viable.
Is it something that we can do? Because I think the more that we move these conversations out of theory and into actual practice, I think the better, because those smaller buses are going to have the kid with his backpack that's half a block away running towards the bus that the bus has to wait for, that's going to exceed that 30-second limit that we had there. And I think if there's some way to real-time test this with real students, I think it would be worth our effort to do that.
We'll certainly have a conversation with STA, and we'll try to make this happen as soon as possible.
You see what I'm saying? I think that's useful information.
Absolutely. Moving it from a theory to rather than having it done on one day to kind of measure this data over multiple days. Sure.
I'm sorry? Say it. About running it for 2-3 weeks with real students?
Yes, we'll certainly have this conversation with STA and figure out how soon we can get this for us kickback.
Is there anyone else?
Well, I have a question right here for Mr. Ganesh.
Absolutely.
And I have a lot to say on this. I think the conversation is productive, but I hope that everybody is seeing what the people who don't want this have been seeing the whole time, which is you're creating a problem to fix nothing. So my question for you is, have you calculated how many additional minutes Perkiomen Valley students will spend on buses as a result of this planned change? Have you? I
No.
don't think you have yet.
No, not
okay.
yet.
And is that something that you could do?
I think we can based on the right times.
I would appreciate your version of that number, and I think it will be an additional amount of time.
Right.
So I would appreciate to hear what you think that number will be. And then I'll probably triple it. But I would love to hear it.
Okay, I can go back and make some calculations to see how many.
But we also have to reduce the time too, because there'll be a subsection of students in my neighborhood that
The
will go-
population balance is not there, and
No,
it is an
you're-
illusion.
Correct. I agree with what you're saying. I am just saying if we're going to do a calculation, which I
I'm
love.
letting him give
Yeah, I know.
me his number.
But we should also make
I'm
sure the
not
students
trying
in skip
to
back
influence
Yeah, I
what-
know. But we should also make sure the students in skip back who are no longer going to West, who are going to be going to
I
East for a
asked,
small time.
I
Yeah.
asked for the increase
Yeah,
in
yeah.
minutes total. So there will be some offsets.
Yes.
Correct. But it's going to be an increase.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question, and it's not for you. It doesn't regard the transportation. However, it does get back to something that, and I sound like a broken record on this, but as far as the options and the other options that have been considered or not, whichever the case might actually be. And the one consideration, I'd like to hear more of what the cons are from the standpoint of looking at 5 to 8 buildings with 2 elementary schools going to east and 2 elementary schools going to west, so that the number of years is 5 years at elementary, kindergarten through 4 in the middle grade levels, and 4 at the high school. Only 3 transitions. Separating the 5 and 6 and the 7 and 8, so that they're not necessarily going to be interacting together at all. If you can talk to, or any of the administration can talk to the idea of what the real cons of an option like that would be.
Mr. DeAndrea or Mr. Creedon, I don't know, or Mr. Marsh, yeah, that would be great. We have looked at that, Mr. Fountain, because I know that there are members around the board table that appreciate the 5-8 for some of the efficiencies it brings and the reduced transition. We've also laid it out in both of our buildings. So I'll let the principals speak to this, and then if there are additional questions, please feel free.
Sorry. The impact at East, when I mapped out 5-8, I wanted to try to keep 5 and 6 on the first floor. If you look at the footprint of the East building, there's more classrooms on the second floor than there are on the first floor. And it's just the way it's designed. So I cannot isolate 5th and 6th grade on one floor. I'll have to split up 6th grade. The 6th grade classrooms, it's only about 4, will be on the second floor with 7th grade in that model. It's impossible to keep them from interacting in the day-to-day transitions with the way the special area classes are situated in the building. We have FCS upstairs, we have art upstairs, music's downstairs, gym's downstairs, cafeteria's downstairs, world languages are upstairs, and those can move around, the world language classes, but in general, with the impact with 5-8, can we make it work? Sure. It won't be as clean as a 7-8 building, or currently what we're doing. The East building was built for 3 grades. So to do something different, add another grade level in, it'll be a little bit messier, but it's doable.
Hi, I can just speak to West specifically. Most of our classrooms are up on our second floor compared to our first floor, and the way we ended up looking at the layout initially was seeing pretty much most or all of fifth, sixth, and seventh needing to be upstairs, with eighth downstairs, and maybe sharing a couple of 7th grade classrooms upstairs. But it is not clean, and it would need to. I mean, it would necessitate the need to, like you said. I think if I'm saying this right, we would still need to make sure that we're creating 2 different cultures within the same building, because that is important when it comes to there being the elementary feel still necessary for that 5-6 development, and then the intermediate feel, middle feel for that 7-8. It creates a little bit of complications in that regard. Given the layout, like Mr. DeAndrea said, is it something that is possible if you make it happen? We would work on doing our best to make that happen, but there's still other concerns that we can address with the 5, 6, 7, 8 split that we aren't necessarily addressing altogether in that 5 through 8 split, culturally and space-wise.
And I know that the bulk of the discussion has been focused on, with the administrative group, has been focused on the 5, 6, and 7, 8. My question is, and this may get down to the idea of saying, are we moving too fast? With those other options, since they weren't really pulled in as far as to really flesh out and see. I mean, you've just heard that they could be possible. I think anything could be possible if given the time to look at it. Could that be something that are fleshed out a little bit more thoroughly, as was the 5, 6, and 7, 8? Not only for this one, but for all of the options.
I mean, we could certainly talk more about what we viewed as the advantages and the challenges. They appear in the slide deck from the January 30th presentation. So we did try to call out some of the things that stood out to us as a team. We could certainly look further, with some probing questions or prompts. Happy to respond and conduct the due diligence that you feel might be necessary beyond what's been presented already. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Continued comments, questions? Mr. Saylor? Dr. Sadler?
I guess I was just thinking when they were talking about the 5 through 8 model of the middle school, I guess the thing I was thinking about was spacing. Is there consideration of increased students? So say we get an increase of students in that 5 to 8 model, will there be enough space to accommodate students if, we got a lot of developments going on in the district, if we have an increase in our student population in that 5 to 8 range, will we be able to accommodate students if we use that 5 through 8 model? I think, because I believe someone said that one of the schools was built for 3 grades, not 4. So I'm always thinking about that space aspect. So that was the only thought that I really had in relation to Mr. Fountain's request that we look at that 5 through 8 model.
My thought on that, if I can respond to that, is right now, if you're looking at all of 5, 6 and all of 7, 8 going in this direction, if you're having half of 5 through 8 and half of 5 through 8, you're still looking at the same numbers.
So, is there anyone else that wants to comment?
Can you go ahead?
No, you sure?
Yeah, I just have a clarifying question with what Dr. Russell said, but ask your question first.
Okay.
Mine's going to be a little, hopefully simple this time. We're currently waiting on, from the county, correct, on the report from the Planning Commission, and it's anticipated, we don't know exactly, correct?
This spring, yeah.
Spring. Is it the intent of administration to present this to the board regardless of whether or not we receive that? Because I think that would be important information for us to consider before we consider which model, so that we know, at least from the Planning Commission's point of view, where they think the population is trending.
I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, we hope we have it in April. It would certainly make sense, based on some of the commentary this evening, to wait for that report. And again, what additional information is needed as a question? That may be information that the board wishes we have. That's why we ordered the study, if you will, contracted for it. So I don't disagree with that step, waiting until we get the Planning Commission's report before the board would be requested to take action on anything.
Has the GKO study been provided to the public?
It's posted in the May 17th board meeting, yes. 2017, it's from May.
Yeah,
The
2017.
GKO is from May
It
of
is, it's old, yes.
2017.
That's right, it's old, yes. But that's what we have right now that we're going on. So I'm referencing that, we're updating through the Planning Commission. But it's posted, it's public, yes.
And before we're done, not addressed to you now, on a separate comment, I just want to also follow up before it closes. I mean, we've got more to talk about, I think, or it'll come up. We're not voting on it tonight. But to reiterate the fundamental issue that is going on here, and the only word that's appropriate, and it's not my favorite word, but this is not fair. You have a bunch of kids that are going to save some time on buses. Now, those kids, though, have to still spend 2 years taking that trip to West. So they're just not going to do it for 3 years. They're going to be saved that trip, and they're only going to save a couple minutes when they have to go to East rather than to West. Whereas you are going to take large population centers, which are Trapp and Collegeville primarily, but also include in that Cranberry Estates and all the many families that we have there, and you are going to create additional time spent on buses for all those families that also never expected it. So it's fair, it's unfair on several different levels. And then we can throw in other considerations that we have a walking community in Cranberry Estates or a quick drop-off community in Cranberry Estates, and there's no such thing that exists around West. You're removing that entire ability for people to live and grow over time within proximity to their central school, which a lot of people, that is the reason why a lot of people chose to buy in Cranberry. They're right there with their elementary. They're right there with their middle. They're right there with their high school. It's very convenient. You know, their kid needs to come home sick and somebody's at home. It's a 2-minute ride. Whereas having to take all of those families, create all that additional bus time for Collegeville Trapp, relative to the time you're saving in Skip Back, and then creating all the additional hardship too for the parents, in addition to reducing the athletic opportunities, which they will be reduced, and PIA opportunities will be reduced. If not in the first year, like they try to hold on to those 4 teams somehow, it will be reduced over time. We know that. All these things that we see the parents in Trapp and Collegeville and Cranberry see are going to happen. They're like, this is a bad idea. Just stop what you're doing. And you're saying, yes, but we have all these wonderful things that are going to happen that we can't prove are going to materialize, but they sound great. But it's just unbelievable that the problems that we see with our eyes, that we are sure are going to happen, and which we're talking about mitigating, which you're trying to mitigate and address, which don't exist, and that's why you have to mitigate them, don't need to happen. These problems don't need to happen. And now we just suggest a possible solution to get rid of that primary problem of all the additional driving time, not to mention how more time on the roads is less safe for all of our students. But 5, 6, 7, 8 all in one building, and how can we arrange that? And I don't want to get too deep into that, dividing up the buildings, maybe remodeling the buildings in certain ways to provide for 5th grade to protect and keep them as innocent for as long as possible. But without the additional burdens on the families and the students of having to be so far away from home and spend so much time on the road. So, and we're not even talking about it. That's what I'm saying. That's what I think you're saying. We're not even talking about it. Are we not even talking about it? Yes, we're not even talking about it. Like, it's not even an option. Like, we've got our plan. Here it is. We're going to do it. And then, oh, by the way, did you want to speak? Did you want to say something? Because it is just wild to me, too, how they are ignoring every parent. And these people do not have young children, okay? But every parent knows. Every parent whose kid is going to be affected by this knows. And they're all missing it. The administration, maybe the teachers, we haven't even heard from them, but the board who doesn't have these kids. It's like they're like, oh, we don't care. It doesn't even occur. I don't get that. I don't get it. So, and I just wanted to go over those highlights and say that they're never going to go away. If you pass this, and I'm talking about it with people in the community, and Wade and Todd are in Collegeville, and I don't know who's not talking to them, who of their neighbors are not talking to them, but I don't know why they don't get it. But I appreciate Wade for evaluating it. I do. And understanding, but I hope he also takes that understanding and grasps that the numbers, according to the numbers, those bus trips are going to double for double the number of students on those buses. So it's not going to be so bad on any individual student. Right, they're going to mitigate it, but it's still going to have that massive negative effect. How they're not paying attention to the parents. And I won't continue to drone on. I appreciate everybody for coming out tonight. And that's all I have. But thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Keenan. Mr. Saylor, do you have anything to add? I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify, and thank you, Ron. I've been a proponent of this when I was in board leadership, and I've mentioned before, I think the outlay of this has been bungled to where we have all these questions and concerns. But you had a dialogue back and forth with Mr. Fountain, and I'm confused. We're not looking into what he's saying, or are we?
We, as an administrative team, have eliminated it. What I understood his question to be was, can you look a little deeper? Can you analyze it a little bit more?
And you agree to that?
Well, if that's the will of the board, we are willing to look into it.
So this is where I get confused. And I mentioned this to you last week in our private meeting afterwards. That's why I've only attended one community meeting in 4 years on the board, and that's why I don't attend community meetings. I do respond to people when they email, or try to, and try to respond with a lot of information that goes through my head. And I went public about my support of this, although not an op-ed, but maybe I'll try that next time. Because people should read the Pottstown Mercury. It's a good paper. You could buy it. But I always get concerned when we say things that we don't mean. We're not looking into Mr. Fallon's idea. So why are we placating the fact, or are we? And the second thing that came to mind is, are we really waiting for this report to come out, and maybe it's going to come out in May or June? And what if the report tells us something totally different? And the report is not going to take into effect occupancy that should be looked at in terms of not how many people fill a building to where the pie chart is filled. It's how many people by policy of 21 to 26 students, how many special need rooms we have, how many paras we have. Occupancy isn't filled. So why does that report mean anything? And if the report is meaningful, shouldn't we wait for the report to come out and then look at what we're going to be doing for the next 10 or 15 years? I'm at the point of someone who is a major proponent of this idea, walking away tonight when I lay my head down to sleep, confused on how I want to vote, because sometimes it looks like the cart is ahead of the apple when it shouldn't. I don't care about that report because I know there are problems in our current middle school system that can't be fixed, period. And it has nothing to do with the teacher, and it has nothing to do with the people that sit on the cabinet. So I always get concerned when we say we say things that we don't really mean. I know a lot of parents think the board's already made a decision. It's not necessarily the board, it's the administration has made a decision, which is their job. They come to the board and say, we have this idea, we want you to vet it, and then the board does their vetting, and that's perfectly fine. But if that report comes back and says, hey, you know what, there's a large plot of land that's up for sale across the street from the Dutch that could be 250 townhomes, which is going to potentially bring 500 new students to Skipback, which is a possibility. There's a horse farm right next to adjacent to the Skipback pool, which might be up for sale, which could bring 1,000 homes if it gets sold the way one builder might want to come in and do it. That's going to change things. Might we potentially in 3 years change your mind and go back? That's message bungled. Now I have questions.
I think we ordered the report. I don't think it's unreasonable to wait for the report, again, based on community questions. That's a courtesy. That's how I'm looking at it.
But what if it doesn't come out till June?
Well, then I guess we have a different conversation about timing. We were hoping to be able to get board approval before the end of the school year. And again, we have 3 elementary schools that are stressed for space. With anticipation of some of our special education classrooms increasing. I mean, there was the potential this year. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. There was the potential this year. If Mr. Fountain wants us to dive deeper into 5.8, if we've left a stone unturned, I am happy to conduct due diligence to look at it. But the administrative team feels as if it has done its due diligence. Mr. Marsh used the word excited. We are excited about the possibilities for students in a 5-6 arrangement and a 7-8 alignment. Now, that doesn't mean I don't appreciate what parents are offering around transportation. Absolutely. Am I missing something? I'm asking the same question. Would that report give us some information that could be helpful and informative? I want to do my due diligence and hear that updated report. However, for kids, for what our elementary schools need, we believe strong, and maybe they're telling me this because I'm the superintendent. I haven't picked that up yet because I've asked them repeatedly, but that resonated tonight. We believe it's what's best for kids. And there actually has been a lot of positive feedback about it too. You don't have that from teachers. We're not going to survey teachers about whether or not they want this. This is an administrative recommendation. They will participate in the planning and the implementation. They do not make the recommendations for decisions. The administrative team does that. And we believe what's best for kids and what will support relieving those space constraints is the 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, the transportation is challenging. It's a problem. It's a bump in the road. We've got to get over it. We're working on ways to try and do that. Ultimately, when the board has all its information, it may say, you know what, Dr. Russell, that's not enough. We're not going to do it. We can't support it. Or you may say, we really appreciate the things that you've thought about to relieve us of those challenges, and the positives far outweigh. That's what we believe right now, that the positives far outweigh the negatives.
So one of the things that I have had conversation and question about in multiple meetings over several years is the impact for construction financially, both in modulars. I know that was something that was brought up several times, and reconfiguring or building on to existing buildings. So We haven't talked about money. This was proposed as sort of a net neutral, or perhaps even a cost savings with regards to transportation once it gets worked out. But I don't know if, Mr. Weaver, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know that we've done homework on construction costs, purchasing land costs for various reasons. Operations was one of them. We've just gone through that process with regards to brand new construction. And then also modulars. I know that was something else you had looked into. So can you speak at all in a broad sense to what that financial impact would look like to the community and for how long?
Sure. So from the perspective of new construction costs, there are local school districts that just opened up bids a couple of months ago. They are at $500 a square foot. To put that into perspective, then 10,000 square foot building with all the amenities then gets you X amount of a cost. That's how we look at those things. From the perspective of modulars, we went out, we did, Mr. Fabrizio and I looked at some quotes. They're $1 million plus. And that's just for the modular. It's an extra $250,000 if you want footers put into the ground. And then there's a whole bunch of planning that will need to be done, working with Mr. Subers to make sure that we do all those things correctly.
Per township, depending on where it is.
Yeah, for township permitting, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the question of where do you put them? So when we built Schwenksville and West, there is piping that was run to the very end of those walls. And we did that on purpose because at the time we were looking at huge explosion in enrollments that never came to fruition. However, we paid a little bit more in construction costs to the very end, so that if we had to add to those particular buildings, we could do that as cost efficiently as possible. The pipes are already there. However, adding to West doesn't necessarily address the issues at hand. Adding to Schwenksville doesn't necessarily address those concerns at this point in time. And those are the only two buildings that were built that way. The high school, it was renovated in here. We did the 3-story science and technology wing. We can't go very, very far with that. We've got issues with impervious surfaces here at the campus as well. So that gives you a little bit of a high level of what Joe and I have been working on. And so there's a whole bunch of other things that come into that play. There's bidding requirements. There's all kinds of stuff that we would need to do to go out, which is low bid, all that kind of stuff that we would need to take into consideration. It is complicated once you step into that realm. It becomes heavily legal and following the rules and regulations, and you have to hire architects and engineers and all of that kind of stuff to get it done right, to meet all the requirements of something called Act 72 or Act 34, the Taj Mahal Act, all of that kind of stuff. Plus, there would be funding that would be needed for that debt service.
So I guess, and I appreciate you laying all of that out in a very, very broad, I hear when you say all of that, I hear, I don't know, I'm not the math person like Mr. Saylor is. Would you say 50 million? Mr. Saylor, what would your...
Oh, you should listen to the Methacton board meetings.
I know that they're
watch
talking
board meetings
about...
for fun.
Well...
They're talking about...
They are interesting, aren't they? Never boring. But I know they're looking into building a high school, right? So that's outfitting from the ground up. And their high school, actually, they need... That's not our issues here. So the millions of dollars to the debt service. So are you explaining that as far as cabinet and administration is concerned, that would be one of the reasons that you wouldn't have considered recommending that as a viable solution?
For me, yes. As Mr. Weaver has shared, 70% of the individuals in our community pay taxes, but they don't have children in our schools. And we have a building out at West with untapped potential for capacity, space for students. So again, we want to be fiscally responsible in that regard and use that building. You saw on paper, not that I believe we would do this, it's got a capacity of 900 students. We don't want to put 900 students at West, but we can probably serve more than 500, which is what we're doing right now. And that's also been a consideration because of the cost too.
So, and then with regard to the fairness piece of it, which means different things to different people, one of the conversations that, some of the conversations that I have had was in hearing feedback about disruption for one elementary school. I was asking about impact numbers. I was wondering about impact numbers versus for skip back, for Evergreen. I know that there's a 50-50 skip back split, so should there be another recommendation that is reached, potentially 50% or 100% of skip back in one scenario would have to go to West. So I was wondering if there would be a good way to capture impact numbers to families with regards to redistricting. Like, in other words, why is it okay to redistrict one portion of the district but not another portion? And kind of, I don't know how you would lay that out on a graph or a chart or something, but I'm just wondering in terms of what the actual numbers are, because there's different numbers per grade per the enrollment report. I don't know if that makes sense in how I said it.
There are different numbers per grade per school.
Right. So it's not exactly apples to apples with terms of disruption, but as a for example, as a West skip back house, 40 minutes on the bus, that was sort of just the thing. Now the point was made when you bought the house in the spot that you bought it, that was the school you knew you were going to, but I don't know if that necessarily is true for everybody.
It wasn't true. I was 06. We were and at that time, 06 was all East.
And 06 was all East. So that's an example there. And so, I think you're still in East House, right?
Yeah, because
you're on the other side.
I'm north of the
right.
elementary
And
school.
so I'm a West House. So that split 50-50 is different than Evergreen's 70-30. And so I just was curious if there was a way to capture what the disruption numbers would be in
Right
different
now
scenarios.
But right now it's everybody.
Yeah.
But then we can balance it as best as possible to affect the least number of students as possible if you want to take advantage of more students at West and overbalance, say, the 5th grade to West and fill it up like that.
But that would
with
you'd
the
have to
5th through
redistrict
8th.
though to do that.
Well,
it seems.
Instead of redistricting the whole district, yes, it would require redrawing
Yeah, I
and
think Mr.
sending.
But
Lee
wouldn't you have to
said-
redistrict the whole district in order to reallocate?
That's what we're
evenly?
doing. We're talking about redistricting the whole district.
Okay.
It's called a realignment. Call it a redistricting.
But the elementary schools aren't going to be realigned.
Well, Mr. Liggett, I think you had talked about, or it might have just been privately moving all the skip back to West.
And all of Evergreen to East.
I believe I spoke about that publicly as
Yeah,
well. And yes, that is a redistrict. It doesn't affect the elementary schools for the students that go to the elementary
Correct.
schools. It affects
The families.
where they go after elementary school.
Whether-
And to tell you the
right.
truth, before we go down that road, in talking amongst the board and in this conversation, it's not that's a spaghetti on the wall type idea. To go down that road and actually consider it as a serious proposal, we would have to look at Skippack Township and the students that go there intensely, because this hasn't really been seriously considered. And essentially the way that the map works right now is the outskirts of Skippack goes to West, and the interior, let's say,
Yeah, the inner go to
goes
east,
to East. If we were to disrupt that by saying, well, that's nice, now everybody's going to West, although intellectually it makes sense because all those outer borders of the geographic region would be going to West, the people that are at the one end, it doesn't change their commute. But it does affect all those people in the middle significantly. The
That's
ones that
right.
anticipate going to East.
To East.
The ones that live just over the bridge.
Right.
And now,
So they're going to be going. So it's,
yeah,
that's
so-
why I'm
so
wondering about the disruption and the fairness.
I think,
yeah.
you know about that cart and horse problem? That's one of those things where I think we're putting that cart before the horse.
Yeah.
It's an idea. There's a whole lot that has to be worked out before we do that. So if we were to use that as a serious proposal, switch out the South parents, put in the Skippack parents in the office.
Have the same
because
conversation.
You're going to have
Yeah.
that exact
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
The impact of all of these ideas
Has an impact on somebody.
has an impact on somebody, and I don't know if anybody else has noticed, the impact and the difference that we see in the emails and the conversations that we have with the person is inversely proportional with the distance from this spot.
This spot meaning campus.
This spot meaning main campus. So when we talk to people in Cranberry that are part of Perkiomen Township, you get more of the, I like things the way they are. I moved here to have my schools here. I'm very familiar with the moving to a place for schools argument. We don't need to go back through that one. But if you look, Collegeville, we hear quite a bit about this. Trapp, we're hearing about it. I've heard almost nothing from a parent in Schwenksville. I've heard maybe one thing from Lower Frederick. So this district-wide issue affects these families different. Some go, 10 extra minutes for me. Not a big deal. So they're not very invested in this. And that's where this whole thing becomes difficult, because we need to think about not just, it is an entire district issue, but there does need to be some parity and some fairness when we do this. The things that we need to address, in my opinion, are like Mr. Saylor was saying, that there are problems at the middle schools right now that can't be fixed any other way. We owe it to the community to tell them what these problems at the middle schools that cannot be fixed in any other way are. And then these are things, so it's no longer a mystery about why it is that we need to fix this middle school. Trust the public, trust the board with what these issues are that you feel there is no other way to fix. If that means that we need to put a mirror up to this district and take a harsh look, then it's time to do that, because we're asking these families to disrupt their lives because we feel that the middle school model is not working right now. We owe it to them to have a full explanation of everything that's there. Don is talking about having better information on the 5-8. I understand why administration's not coming up with a laundry list of the positives and negatives of 5-8. That's not their job. Their job is to present to us what they think that their best option is. It's up to the rest of us to essentially judge that and have you made the case.
Exhaust all options. And I guess, to Mr. Liggett, to your point, I guess my thought as you were saying that is, depending on how closely you've watched education committee of the whole meetings, wellness meetings, data presentations over the last, I would say maybe 6 or 7 years, I think you have a different level of awareness as to some of the more nuanced cultural issues between East and West, and some of the problems that have been,
That's exactly what
incrementally.
I'm talking about.
So I think that there's a lack of equal awareness about all of those things, but I think
make them aware.
to put it all in a summary. And I think, but that's not grasping at straws. That's just reiterating conversations that are previous.
If you want the district to buy into this, if you want the public to support this, even the families that are affected negatively, there are ways where a family realizes my kid's going to have to spend an extra 10 minutes on the bus per time.
But
the reason that it's worth it is because, let's say, is it that the education is better at one building compared to the other? Is it because of, they need to know, to get the buy-in from the district.
How do you know they don't
They
have it?
need to know it.
How do you know we don't have it?
How do I know? Because I have an inbox in my board email. I have eyes
Do you
right
think that's
now.
a lot of emails?
Yeah, here. Let me show you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
in
on-
my folder
Yeah.
of the emails.
I have the same emails.
I understand. Well, that's not necessarily true, depending on other parents that engage with you.
Sure.
But my against email folder is pretty 71.
I've had 700. Not on this topic, but on other topics.
I understand that. And it doesn't matter though, because we
700.
still owe it to these.
Correct. No, but when you say we don't have buy-in, we don't. You're assuming. Not that I'm. By the way, not that I'm disagreeing with everything you just stated, except the last part is, you're assuming that we don't have overwhelming buy-in from the parents of this school district. 70 is a small subset. Now, that same
Understood.
70 could be 150 because not everyone feels comfortable coming to a board meeting. So I appreciate them coming to a board meeting. Not everyone feels comfortable sending an email. That's all fine. I am just saying, we're not indicative. So
Popular
Yeah.
opinion.
Didn't have to change venue in
there's
order
no
to
way
have
to
a
judge.
conversation, right.
Yeah, the judging popular opinion from our things
Sure,
is
it's
never
difficult.
accurate.
Correct.
When we had
Yeah.
issues with the bathrooms, one side thinks that they had the majority, the other side thinks they also had the majority.
Correct.
Using the exact same metrics that you're talking about.
Correct, yeah.
So when there is no dipstick to check the oil level of the district.
correct. You're correct. I'm just saying we don't know, and a board member will never know.
No.
If we have.
Either way, we
Correct.
still owe the public the exact
diligence,
same
correct.
explanation,
Yep.
and we need to be going through the issues in the same way. We need to present it to them in a way that is totally open, and if it's rough on us, then so be it.
Correct. Like I said, I think the message has been bundled. Dr. Russell, I have a quick question. In 2009, we had 771 students in Skip Back. Today, we have 557. How is Skip Back full today, but not full in 2009? In 2009, we had 2,728 elementary students. Today, we have 1958.
Part of the reason is because,
And this is important.
yeah, it is important. Part of the reason is because we have increased the number of special education classes, district-wide special education classes.
And the class
that-
size.
And class sizes have gone down. We have
From
worked,
28 to, what is it today? So 7 full students.
yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
lot in one room.
Yes, it is a lot in one room. And again, we have worked diligently to keep those class sizes low. The board has been extremely supportive of that. Our buildings host, again, students, special education, district-wide classrooms. In one building, we have a Head Start classroom, which is an MCIU classroom. The dynamics of the building, the needs that we are serving have changed over time.
So hypothetically, why don't we just go to 32 students in a room and all of a sudden we create plenty of space?
We could, and we could put specials on a cart too. We could put specials back on a cart. That was also a
That wouldn't
strategy.
work.
Well,
I mean, it would work because the board said so, but it wouldn't be
Right.
productive
It's
and
less
conducive
than
to
ideal.
what we're looking for. Yeah.
I agree.
So along those lines, between the conversation, you devil's advocate, we could do it, but is it really what's best for students? And then also listening to and responding to what we're hearing. One of the reasons that I felt it was so important to have community meetings is to allow for administration, and whether or not teachers have said one word about this to anyone directly or not, they all have an opinion about it and they watch these meetings. So they are formulating their belief based on what they hear and also what they see in buildings. I wanted to make sure that all of that could be heard in a public forum for the purposes of more eyes on the subject, so you are able to and capable of responding in a way that is not an educator's lens. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to Dr. Russell, help us understand what, I guess, the pros and cons list. I don't know a way to say it other than that, the pros and cons list, to reiterate again, because we keep seeing the same themes come over against the proposal, against your recommendation. But there's only one or two themes there.
So the pros and cons list of why we believe 5-6 is better. I think if we go back to this slide that Mr. Marsh referenced, these are the things that we believe we could achieve and would be better for our students in their experience, their education here in the district. And just on the note of communication, as a district, we have typically tried to be open and transparent, not non-transparent, and hold these community meetings to get feedback from our families, to hear their insights, to hear their concerns, their hard questions. They hold us accountable. That's what we do. We've also met with Each of the building staff, we've gotten feedback from our staff. I've met with home and school organizations. So again, in an effort to really be more of an open communicator as opposed to closed, there have been lots of conversations. And in those conversations, some very positive feedback as well as some negative feedback. Negative meaning, I don't really like this idea for these reasons. But all of these points here are ones we believe that will serve our students well. Again, we talk about having all teachers of one grade level in a building and the consistency that brings, the equity of opportunity and experience, the collaboration that would be afforded and facilitated on the part of our staff. We believe that pays off in benefits for student learning. That's the theory of action. There's research that supports when teachers come together and have opportunities to collaborate and focus on delivering curriculum in a consistent manner, it can pay off for students. We believe that developmentally, because 5th and 6th graders are more alike, that we can support their social, emotional, and behavioral needs more effectively in a building where they are together. We believe we can overcome the extra transition and support that. And if you read the research, yes, there's research that says transitions can be hurtful and harmful to kids. They can be hard. We know that we're constantly focused on transitions. There's also research that says, depending on what you're doing in a building and how you're nurturing the culture in the school community, you can overcome the challenges that some of our students might experience. We can overcome all kinds of challenges based upon how we operate. We believe in a 5-6 building, we can more effectively, strongly serve the needs and strengths of our 5-6 students. And they're really referenced around this, students at the center.
Mr. McKinney, do you have anything to add? Any question that you might be wondering? The answer can be no.
Well, I thank you, Ms. White, for the opportunity, and I think this has been a very productive conversation, and one of the things that I appreciate here is my colleagues on the board who have expressed with great passion how they feel about this issue. The one thing that I would hope that the community does understand is I don't think any board member has made up their mind. I mean, lots of conversation is still happening. So, Mr. Keenan, thank you for looking into my mind to tell me what I'm thinking and how I'm thinking. But again,
not at all. Not at all. I encourage people to talk to you about it.
and I have talked with people, and that's the thing about it, because you said that.
We're in college.
Yes.
You and I.
Yes. And I have talked to people. So unless you know the facts, don't put it out there that I haven't talked to anyone. So, but the thing about it is, we're getting to that point again on this board where it's like, people are calling one another out, and that's just getting ridiculous. I understand these folks coming out, and I truly appreciate them giving their testimony to this issue. No decision has been made. We're still making up our minds or whatever. And the thing about it is, we will have lots of conversation, and hopefully we'll come to the right decision. So I hope that people don't feel that this has been a jaded process. I hope, because again, if we can't trust one another and if we can't speak to one another and we can't work with one another, then that's going to get back to those days when, every week was 3-hour meetings where people come out and just tend to, vacillate on their issue, but again, pitting up one another against each other. Do I trust the administration? Do I trust the educators? Yes. Are they human? Yes. So the thing about it is, let's continue to talk and we'll figure this out.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Did anyone have anything else to add? The only other question that I have, Dr. Russell and the administrators that are here, with regard to this point of the student-centered learning, was with regard to relationships and how relationships are built and how long it takes to build those relationships. So I'm wondering if I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if there could be conversation from an administrator maybe in a building as to the process of building a relationship. I understand 2 years versus 3 years is just a 1-year difference. I know right now at West, for example, the counselor follows the grade for the duration. I would venture that would be the expectation, regardless of the model that we ultimately decide to move to, or I felt like when we made that change, that was a very positive change, to have the continuity of the same counselor, to allow for a more seamless transition once they aged out of that building. So whether that be 2 years or 3 years, or, like the 5-8, the 5, 6, 7, 8 model, I'm just wondering, having been in a classroom, with the smaller the child, the more willing they are to form a bond with you. And so I'm just wondering if you can speak to that, maybe Mr. DeAndrea. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you have point of reference from kindergarten all the way up, so.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Marsh has pointed this out a couple times in these community meetings. We're all about building relationships with the kids, and it's a little bit different at each level. At the elementary level, the kids, they form really strong bonds with their one teacher. And I mean, all of you sitting at this table now can probably rattle off all of your elementary school teachers, right? Each year is a new transition in elementary school. I'm not sure the kids know who the principal is until maybe 3rd grade because they're so focused on their classroom teacher. That is the connection. A lot of students don't have totally close relationships with their counselors necessarily, but it's really important when they need that connection with their student, with the counselor. So I think the focus is year to year that the relationships with the teachers is really what's most critical, and that our building leadership is we're building school cultures where we facilitate those positive relationships in whatever way we can. And I've seen that being at all 3 levels. The high school kids, it's just as important for them to have those close relationships with their teachers year to year. Each year, I see each year kind of as a new transition within each building.
Thank you very much for that. Go ahead, Mr. Marsh.
Really, really briefly, I think that one of the hallmarks, one of the hallmarks of the district in my time has been that the compliments that we have received and individually and collectively are that from teachers to support staff to administration, we truly care about these kids. Building the relationships with them, I think, so proud of the stops that I've had in the district and the places that I've had a chance to influence, that it is about unconditional respect for children. If I've said to a student in my office, whether it's at the high school or this morning at Evergreen, a little differently at Evergreen that you would say it to a student today, but they can say anything they want in our office. They can say anything they would like, as long as they don't threaten me. They can say anything they would like. And you give that assurance to students, and I don't care if they're a kindergartner or a senior, that's how we lead as adults in this district. So when you say, how do we go about doing it? When I say we can get that magic piece back, you're going to see the patience, and you've experienced it, everybody has here, the patience and expertise of our teachers and the caring that they demonstrate to kids. I think that's the core of it. So just offer that to you.
Thank you for that. I kept thinking about the relationship piece of it as everybody was talking, so I appreciate you taking the time to point it out. Any last thoughts before we move to 2.04? You sure, Mr. Leggett? Okay. All right.
I just want to say thank you to all the community members for coming out today. I am a little, I'm surprised I'm saying this. I am a little more intrigued with the 5-8 idea. A little more intrigued to get some more information about that. I work in a district with a 5-8 model, so I have a personal experience with that, which I'm not a big fan of that, but I'm always open to just hear more options in respect to that. So my perspective isn't limited in that way, even though I have an experience with that model that I'm not an advocate of, but I'm open to see if things could be reimagined possibly here in PV. So thank you all for coming out today.
So Dr. Russell, I know you took a lot of notes while everybody was speaking. So for next week, if we could have a superintendent's report part B to address some of the items in your notes, additional items, disruption numbers, maybe some cost figures and impact to budget, I think would also be really helpful for the board to consider. Because obviously, you know, to Mr. Saylor's point, can it be done? Yes. Should it be done? That's a separate conversation. You know, a financial impact sometimes, unfortunately, in the world that we live in, is a driver for a decision. So we'll look forward to that.
Sure.
I appreciate that. Okay, 2.04, solicitor's report, Mr. Subers.
No report.
Are you saying that only because of it's 9:30?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I can
Yeah.
respond to any questions. I wasn't going to have an affirmative report. What's your
Yeah.
question?
I have a few questions. Did we receive a Dear Colleague letter?
A dear colleague letter, well, there's been several dear colleagues letters.
Did you receive a Dear Colleague letter about Title IX?
Yes.
On February 4th, or did you get it later?
I'm not sure what date I received it, but
Okay.
we received it.
Okay. So the reason I asked for the date is because we had a policy meeting a couple days after February 4th, and I would have loved to know that we received a Dear Colleague letter. I learned about the Dear Colleague letter originally from another school board member at another school district whose solicitor sent that out to the board before their policy meeting. So PIAA made some changes to their manual, separately from the Dear Colleague letter. PIAA made some changes to their manual and the verbiage in their construct of how an athlete can participate. And with the Dear Colleague letter, I just have a couple questions. This past weekend at Penn, 2 boys ran on the track team for girls' track teams at 2 local schools. Another local school district sent out a communication to their community saying that they're willing to lose federal funding. They're not going to change their policy over that. The Dear Colleague letter makes it, to me, pretty clear, and PIAA's changes make it clear that they want to switch policy from the House principle to solicitor's advice. So I'm curious how we take into effect PIAA's changes to what they made and the Dear Colleague letter and the effective changes to Title IX in regards to boys playing girls' sports.
Well, right now, and it's timely because Colonial School District has a legal action has been instituted against the Colonial School District.
Colonial is where?
Plymouth Whitemarsh.
That's the school district that had a boy run on the girls' track team this past weekend.
That's,
But
well,
that,
I
but
mean,
that
the-
incident was from 2024.
Correct.
Yeah.
Both athletes are continuing to participate on the track team, so it's still a potential issue, and it's not moot. We represent Colonial, so I'm very up to speed on that. PIAA was a party to that action. PIAA, the first hearing is tomorrow. It's for a temporary restraining order seeking to prohibit Colonial from enforcing their policy, which does allow trans students to participate in the teams aligned with their gender identity. The case is scheduled before Judge Beetlestone, which is the judge who
handled the
COVID case for Perk Valley. Again, the TROs tomorrow. We don't expect PIAA to contest the plaintiff's request for relief. The district,
In layman's terms, what does that mean? You don't expect PIAA
to oppose the plaintiff's request for a temporary restraining order prohibiting Colonial from enforcing their policy.
Okay.
It remains to be seen what the judge determines. This is actually the initial stage of the litigation. If you recall the COVID litigation that we were involved in, the next step would be a hearing for a preliminary injunction, and then ultimately you proceed with discovery and a final disposition of the case, either through trial or further motions. At this point, although PIAA, again, it remains to be seen. The first hearing is tomorrow. It's a motion hearing on the TRO. Again, we anticipate that PIAA will not oppose the plaintiff's request. They could still.
Well, they're not going to oppose it because they just met and they changed their policy.
Well, no, but their policy really didn't change. I mean, when this first happened and when it was really the executive order on protecting women's participation in sports that triggered the PIAA response and the, or change in position. And initially, it was the chairman of the PIAA board announced that they were going to comply verbatim with the executive order. That caused, again, this is anecdotal and hearsay. I mean, I didn't participate in these meetings or discussions, but from what I understand, that caused significant upheaval within the PIAA board. The only thing you can really track that's objectively available is the change in policy. And the change of policy, really, it used to be up to the high school principal as the PIAA representative. Now they're recommending, instead of taking a position as to whether or not to follow the executive order and take a hard stand, in my opinion, they chose not to make that tough decision. Correct. And what they did was they kept it in the hands of the local school districts. They changed the language to say that the district will make the decision and not the high school principal, and they recommended that you consult with your solicitor. Anytime there's an issue of dispute, almost anytime you request guidance from PDE or any other agency, including PIAA, they always put it back on the solicitor.
Well, they changed it from the procedural manual, and are they not requesting that it's no longer the principal? It says it here.
Yeah, they are.
They've crossed out principal.
Yeah, it's not the principal.
Correct.
It's the district as a whole, which is the district. I mean, ultimately it would be the board.
Not the board.
Well,
it says
the
where
district.
a student's sex, gender is questioned or uncertain, the decision of the school as to the student's sex will be accepted by PIAA in accordance with the Presidential Executive Order 1421, yada, 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 dated yada, yada, yada. Schools are required to consult with their school solicitor relative to the compliance to the order. PIAA is basically saying it'll be up to the school solicitor to tell the superintendent or someone what to do with that.
They're directing the school to consult with their solicitor. At this point,
yeah.
I am not recommending, and my firm is not recommending an affirmative change in policies pending this litigation. I mean, this litigation is directly on point.
Sure. So if the court rules tomorrow that,
Go ahead.
or whenever, if the court rules within the prior to our next board meeting, which is a policy meeting, and puts a hold on boys running girls track or whatever they put a hold on to, are we going to change our policy? And our policy today still does not go into accordance with PIAA.
Your policy doesn't address it.
Our policy right now says it's up to the house principal if there's a question.
Oh, well, that can be changed. I mean, again, that's not really substantive.
So
that's really, I think it's.
Does Fox represent Springfield on Paper Mill Road by LaSalle?
We represent Springfield Township School District.
Yeah, so their superintendent sent out a communication basically saying, just summarizing, but saying, we have a mission statement and values, and we understand we're going to lose federal funding. Is that what Fox Rothschild believes that we should?
Listen, I cannot divulge what our advice is to another client. That would breach the client.
Sure, but they broadcasted it out.
They broadcasted their decision.
Yeah.
I'm not going to divulge what our advice was to them because I would breach the attorney-client privilege. We represent school districts all over the state, and of varying bents and who are taking varying positions in regard to this issue. What I'm saying is, and again, realize that whatever Judge Beetlestone does tomorrow or in the upcoming weeks or months, it will be persuasive. It's not necessarily precedential or binding against the school district, but it's certainly the type of information that we consider in rendering opinions. And to me, it makes the most sense to see that, since there is active litigation, there are 92 federal court cases nationwide challenging the executive orders issued by Judge Trump. And that was as of last week. There may be more.
President, not judge.
President Trump, yes. So, I mean, it's a very fluid situation. This Colonial case gives us an opportunity to see how one judge in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania considers the matter and considers the impact of Boyertown, Doe versus Boyertown, which is still the binding precedent in the Third Circuit, impacts on this decision. And the other thing that I would point out is whether or not there's still talk that PIAA may further clarify their position. If that, I mean, it's
Correct, 'cause
there's
they're-
all kind of,
Correct.
all these factors have to be considered.
Okay. Lastly, will you get back to the board? I'm requesting prior to the policy meeting, in the PNN, it talks about PHRA. It talks about how PHRA contains definitions for gender identity and expression that were not used in the original 103 policy. So I'm assuming in the updated 103 policy, they're also not using that term based off of Bostic versus Clayton County. Will you give the board some information prior to the policy meeting about the PNN that was established and put out yesterday on this issue?
Yes.
And is there a chance, as the school district that you represent, is there a chance that school districts lose their federal funding over not adjusting to the president's executive order?
There was a Dear Colleague letter issued Saturday.
Okay.
That explained, I'm sorry, what was just issued was the OCR policy manual was updated. OCR is the Office of Civil Rights. It's the office in the Federal Department of Education, which enforces Title IX. And has been directed by President Trump to revisit the interpretations and positions that it has been taking. This policy manual, it's a complaint policy manual. It lays out the steps that would have to be taken before you lose federal funding. There would have to be a complaint filed with OCR. OCR would have to review that to see if the allegations were sufficient to establish a violation under Title IX. At that point, they would issue a determination letter as to whether or not they were proceeding, notify the district, the recipient. The recipient then would then be offered the opportunity to engage in an informal resolution process. Only after the recipient denied the opportunity to participate in an informal resolution process would OCR then proceed with their investigation. They would have to proceed with that investigation, which could take months. We've had OCR investigations take years. They would have to gather all the relevant data from the district, interview all the relevant witnesses from the district, interview all the relevant data that the complainant and any witnesses that the complainant wanted to have. It's a time-consuming, burdensome process. Only after that investigation is complete do they issue a determination letter which finds whether or not you were in violation of Title IX. At that point, and during that, or prior to that, they also offer you both parties the opportunity for mediation to resolve it. Once you get a determination letter, which again, I can't tell, based on past history, you're talking a year to a year and a half. And they're cutting staff. So I'm not sure how they're going to investigate anything. Okay. But in any event, once you get the determination letter, you still have an opportunity to resolve it directly with OCR without having your federal funding threatened. So there's multiple steps where the district would have the opportunity to say, all right, hold on, we are now being investigated. There's a finding that there is at least allegations sufficient to substantiate a violation. We would want to take the opportunity to reconsider our position.
Yeah, two last questions. Maybe one last question. Depends on how I word it. A local board member stated that school boards should not listen to PIAA nor executive orders because in Pennsylvania we should be listening to PHRC, Pennsylvania's Human Rights Commission. Where does the member be more focused on what PHRC says?
I understand the question. The question's not an easy answer, and here's why. Typically, when you have overlapping federal and state law, the part, like for instance, in discrimination, anti-discrimination, whatever provides the person to be protected, the greater protections, that would apply, that would control. So if the state law under the PHRA provided greater protections to an individual than the federal law, typically the state law would control because it's providing greater protections. The difficulty here is which class are you protecting?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, been brought out in no uncertain terms, under the current administration. So you have state law providing greater protections to a transgender student in this instance, and you have unsettled federal law, and we're not sure, and it is unsettled yet, notwithstanding the executive orders. You have to understand that the executive orders are not binding on local education agencies. They're only binding upon federal departments and agencies.
Yes, correct.
They also cannot change the law. They cannot override binding legal precedent. So the question is again, that's why Doe is still relevant. But let's say that plays out over
Talking
time.
about Boyertown versus Doe?
Yes.
Yep.
So as that plays out and all of this plays out, if there is a determinative binding, judicial, it's going to be a judicial precedent. It's going to be resolved by the courts. When that happens, I would think because of the competing interest that federal law will preempt, ultimately. But it's all unsettled right now.
And if the Commonwealth legislature passed, potentially will be vetoed, but if the Commonwealth was able to pass legislation, would that supersede?
They could change the definitions that are currently being applied under the PHRC regulations.
There are two bills, one in the House and one in the Senate right now.
And again, and we are monitoring things and we are putting out client alerts regularly, but like I said, you're getting these things in rapid fire, and believe me, we are paying attention to it. Then you wouldn't have the conflict between federal and state law in that instance, but you still have, you still have the Third Circuit's decision in Doe, and pursuant to the Supreme Court decision in Lopert from a year ago, judges make those calls, and they are not bound by the departmental guidance issued. So it's really, it used to be under the Chevron case that judges had to defer to the interpretation of the agencies or departments.
That got wiped out.
That got wiped out. So now these judges are looking at it, and they don't have to defer to the Department of Ed. They're going to make their own calls. So that gives greater weight to Doe for now, and to these decisions that will over time be coming out. And one such decision being the Colonial case. And I'm not saying that that's going to be resolved in any dispositive way anytime soon. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to deny a temporary restraining order or preliminary injunction order or request without even getting to the merits.
Sure, yeah. All right, thank you.
So you did have a report.
I'm always ready, but
Very good. All right, 5.5, we're not there yet. 2.05, Board and District Committee reports. We have, as Mr. Saylor alluded to, a policy committee meeting next Monday, starts at 6 p.m., directly before our next board meeting, which starts at 7. We have an Education Committee of the Whole meeting on the 13th. Just before that at 6 p.m. will be the Wellness Committee. Safety and Operations meets on March 20th. And I think that is all for upcoming community committee meetings. Are there any comments with regard to board committees, MCIU or JOC?
Can I just say one thing, because I think we missed it in the
Sure.
superintendent's update? Just
Go
want
for
to
it.
congratulate Colin Sturgis for winning states in shot put.
That's exciting.
Thank you.
Congratulations to him.
Thank you.
We had a busy week between basketball and all of the different things. Okay, excellent. Okay, any other JOC, MCIU, Anything? Anything? Okay. Moving on to section 3, consent agenda. The consent agenda is presented and will continue to be built throughout the meeting. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, Mr. McKinney, education section.
Okay, Mr. Mitchell, are you ready to go?
I am. Good evening. For education updates, 4.01 has the comprehensive plan final approval listed, which is also 4.02. The plan is sitting for the 28 days until the 5th, so we will actually present the plan next week. 4.03, we have an approval of a Japan exchange program. This is, for June to July, somewhere between June and July of 2027. So we're presenting this for approval. Any questions about the Japan trip?
I don't have any questions. I know these are the recommendations from Education Committee, correct? So
The Japan trip was not on the Education Committee of the whole.
Oh, it must have been last month. We did talk about it previously. I do remember that. So I'm wondering, and I don't expect you, Mr. Mitchell, to go through the agenda items. Mr. McKinney can do that. But you don't have slides or whatever. That's your presentations for next week. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure. Take the heat off of you. All right, so the Education Committee, I'm sorry, the education update will be presented next week with the final comprehensive plan with regards to what needs to be submitted to the state.
Correct.
Because it's in, you said it, review for 28
Sitting in
days.
public review.
Sitting in public review. Excellent. All right, so then, Mr. McKinney, that goes back to you, 4.02.
4.02 is a recommended action motion to approve the comprehensive plan and state required reports. Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, we shall move that to consent.
So if I could, Mr. McKinney, the actual report sits until the 5th this week, and then we will provide the updated version to the board by Friday in the memo so that you have it for the weekend to read through. And then any questions or any highlights that Mr. Mitchell, they're very similar to what he presented last month. He can do that Monday night if necessary, if needed.
So it'd be jumping to 4.03.
Yeah. We're not ready for consent yet. Thank you.
For 4.02.
Thank you.
Withdraw that request. 4.03, approval of the Japanese exchange program. Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, we shall move that to consent. 4.04, motion to accept an additional allocation for the structured literacy grant. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, we shall move that to consent. 4.05, approval of K through 12, motion to approve the MCI to provide K through 12 gifted service programs review. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, we shall move that to consent. And 4.06 is the enrollment report.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Business, Section 5, Dr. Weston.
Thank you, Ms. White. Item 5.01, Finance Committee of the Whole. Mr. Weaver, may we have your report, please?
Good evening, everybody. Isn't it amazing when Mr. Super speaks? Just to think I was playing with Lincoln Logs at 10 years old. I'm sure he wasn't. I'm sure he was reading books, so that was
I
pretty
had
good.
Lincoln Logs too.
All right, so I appreciate the time tonight. We're going to move fairly quickly. We have a minor budgetary update, which you'll see, which just reflects a lot of the conversation that we had last month in regards to recognizing the governor's proposal for the SB and the special education proposal based upon PASBO's recommendation, my business office officials' professional recommendation to recognize $389,000 into the budget. Overall, it is a $132 million, almost $133 million revenue projection for the school district at this point in time. Keep in mind, we have very little movement at this presentation. However, the PASBO conference is next week, which I will be attending. Hopefully Mrs. Hurd gets up for a day or two as well. And then we'll have some additional information for us to chew up heading into April. Things get really busy for us in April. From a projection standpoint, we do look at our first projection as well, overall, and how we're doing year to date for this year. So there are the similar slides that you've had before. I will note that the federal programs, as recognized in accounting purposes for the school district, is $651,204. I have another slide that breaks that down, and to add additional items that are federal monies that come in, they are passed through. Essentially, the IDEA funds come through the MCIU, and then they are passed through to us, so we recognize them as local revenues. But those would be impacted as well, and I have another slide for that. Again, additional information that you've already seen before. Just a keynote on the alternative revenues, again, just to get that into the record. These alternative revenue sources over the years, you can see, are highly tied to economic performances. So when we talk about the Fed, and they might be reducing interest rates or addressing interest rates for inflation, how does that impact us in Perkiomen Valley? Well, obviously you can see that green bar there on each of those years when the interest rates are really super low. While we have a lot of money in there, the investments that we're allowed to invest in by public code are very limited and minor. However, when those interest rates tick up, now they were about 5% when we locked into a lot of these items for this year. They're still at about 4.5%. There is some conversation about additional cuts coming forward in terms of financial at the national and international perspective. So we might want to keep an eye out on that. But we have kind of cushioned ourselves as far as being conservative with that number to begin with.
And could you go back 2 slides, 3 slides?
2 slides, 3 slides. That one?
Yeah. So how much do we receive in federal funding?
I have a slide in here.
Yeah.
So from an accounting perspective, it's 651.
Yep.
From a totality perspective, should I just go to the end?
Oh, no.
Oh,
If it's coming up, I'll wait.
Okay, all right. So here's that 9-year cohort survival method that Dr. Russell mentioned. That is a key component in helping us to establish moving forward. Again, I'll say it, I did not invent this. George Althouse, going way back to the early 90s, invented this, and it's been a fantastic table for us to utilize. Projected expenditures as of tonight, $137,626,948, broken out by the state account code by object code. That is a 3.58% increase. We have one additional item that is part of that figure, which is to reflect the additional cost for the girls' flag football program that Mr. Felty brought forward and we had approved earlier as part of our catch-up seminars that Mrs. Hurd and I have on a weekly basis, daily and weekly basis. We discovered that we never added the $15,000, so that is added as of tonight. Here's a breakdown of all of the important high-level components associated with the expenditures. The items in red are items that have changed since the last presentation. When it comes down to revenues versus expenditures, that drives a shortfall of $3.8 million currently. Converting that into what does that look like for an investment in our real estate millage? That is a 4.75%. That is down. Again, our goal is to get to the 4% by April or May. By the time we go to preliminary budget approval, we'd like to be below that. And I did preface this conversation when we started back in October, it would be a tough road for us to hoe to get below that 4%. We're working on it. We do have some options associated to us. One of those things that we look at is maximizing staff with school police, school security, and the contracted services. How do we better do those in a more efficient manner? We are looking at adjusting staffing positions based upon enrollments or adjustments. The special education teacher we've had conversations with, that is part of our original request moving forward for salaries. that is an area where I'm working with Mrs. Aducci. That might be an area that we might strongly consider in the future for removal based upon the current enrollment numbers. Counselor needs, retirements. Again, we don't always know about all of our professional staff, administrators, whoever it might be that might be retired or retiring. So we'll keep a look on that. Third look, Bucksmont. We know we're looking at that. Remember, the second look came in, it was a 0. However, the caveat there was that they were looking at an Ozempic drug for that, which would have bumped that up to about a 2%. So we left it in at the 3% just to give us a little bit of flexibility. But that is an area, when we get that third look, we can tighten that number up. Unassigned fund balance, we have yet to discuss. We usually tie that in when we do the projection for how we're doing for 24-25. So expect to see that conversation come up. We'll preface that and get as much information out as we can for the unassigned fund balance. And again, we strategically use that fund balance and have for years. And the state budget, well, again, we've already recognized what was in the governor's proposal because of the historically low dollar figures for special education and ESB. And some of the other conversations, hopefully we'll figure out during the conference. Hopefully there's additional information. And of course, we got a couple of months until that settles out. It might not settle out until June 30, after we have to approve our budget, because we have to take care of our business. And it might be August, I don't know, when we're already started our fiscal year. So that's kind of what we're looking at, items that may change. So federal impact. If you look at,
Jim?
Yes.
Before you move on?
Yes.
Just refresh my memory, the Act 1 index for us, it's 4%, is that correct?
Yes.
So we're 0.75 over it as we sit currently.
That is correct.
And because we signed the Act 1, we are essentially mandated to get to that 4%.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thanks,
Yes.
Jim.
Okay, so from a federal impact standpoint, so we have to summarize. Remember, accountants are a little different how we do things. So I mentioned the source. So IDEA monies, $918,000, and the little intervention that they kicked in there for almost $3,000. That goes to the IU in a block grant. So the IU, when they say how much they're losing in federal programs, they actually code it to a federal account code. We, however, because it's passed through to us, we recognize it as a local revenue. So it's not shown in that $651,000. When you add up all those things, project access, titles, the Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV, and then E-rate, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, those are all federal initiated programs. And to give you an idea of what that would be like if eventually the federal programs are changed in some way, shape, or form, and they would stop coming to the school district. As far as this year goes, it would have taken our tax increase from a 2.59 to about a 4.5. Okay, so it would have added 0.73 mils to that overall, which would have brought us to that total. Just to make up for that, it would have been a 77% increase in our real estate tax from where we were from a millage increase perspective. Again, those are numbers, accountants live in that world. But for a perspective, if you had a home assessed at $180,000, your tax bill was $169.55 because that's what we approved. If the federal monies would have been removed, your tax bill would have been $300.10. That's presuming that we would have approved a 4.59, even dollar for dollar swap. Federal money's out, real estate tax has to go up to meet that demand and that change, that delta, and that would have driven that. That's just an example. And again, just remember that these are 24-25. So as we talk about 25-26, those numbers may change a little bit. On the right-hand side is how federal monies impact our food service fund. That's different than the general fund. And we honestly don't know how that would impact, because those are some big dollars. Our total food service budget is $2.7 million. So if they stop reimbursing us for all of those items that they have there as listed, I don't know how we would run food service. So it's a legitimate concern from a food service perspective because it's a proprietary fund. It doesn't exist in the general fund. When we look at raising taxes, those taxes don't go to the food service fund. What subsidizes the food service fund, heavy induction of state and federal monies, and also the prices that our students and adults pay for their meals. So that's a little bit of a concern for us when we look at that. Again, to be determined, and we'll continue to watch that because we certainly don't want that. We have a fine running food service program. It breaks even. It has a profit, and we know that, and so we're good in that perspective.
Mr. Reaver, can you, I know that this slide is with the federal money impact to the budget, but we haven't had any conversation or dialogue about the cost of food, and I didn't know how that worked with regard to food service in general. Are there contracted prices that are locked in for a certain duration for the things that we order from our distributors? And how do we react to how that will ultimately be adjusted?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do belong to procurement supply chains that guarantee certain prices, not everything, certain prices. And when sometimes what we've discovered is over the years, when those prices are held firm, they'll actually come up with another surcharge at the bottom. So the infamous one a couple of years ago was fuel surcharge. Because of the processes associated with trucks and diesel, and the gas was going going way more than expected, and so they had to make up their money. So the way that they did that was they added a fuel surcharge onto all their deliveries. They held the prices for the vegetables and for the milk and all that kind of stuff. Of course, milk is set by state regulations. That's an area that we're concerned with. Kelsey does participate. Set up through Beth Yoksich years ago, participation in that local procurement platform, and that's been really good to us. And that's a lot of local cafeterias and food services that come together that procure a lot of their different materials, their supplies.
So I guess really then the question is, as you develop next year's budget and you're working towards that with your team, is there conversation about, or any, I don't know how to word it, are there any red flags with regards to the way that the cost will be impacted in the next, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, not yet. We continue to monitor that. Remember, the food service prices are driven by the National School Lunch Program, so we cannot arbitrarily just go out and say we want to charge $4.50 for a lunch. It's driven by calculations within the National School Lunch Program and what they allow us to do. So be mindful of that. But yes, we are certainly looking at that, but we can't predict at this point in time.
Okay. I just didn't know if there was any backdoor dialogue about that with regard to program existence.
Not at this point in time, but we'll keep an eye out for it. And of course, PASBO, PSBA, legal items, Kelsey and her cohort, our cohorts that work together. We have some really good colleagues in the county and throughout the state that will help.
Okay.
So we will not hesitate to reach out and ask.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And share. Okay, any other questions on the federal monies? Again, general fund, okay, you see the difference. Food services is much more of a concern for us because of the size of the federal nugget that goes in there. So the next steps, there are check marks where we're at. We're heading towards a projection in April, which will be the 5th comprehensive budget review. We have the preliminary general fund budget legally has to be done May 5th, and then the final general fund budget approval June 9th as it's currently scheduled. Okay, moving on to grass cutting, Mr. Fabrizio. So we ran an RFQ for our grass cutting services. The winning bid, and we're recommending Green Ridge Landscaping Incorporated. We did get 3 bids for a total of $46,000. That is slightly higher than last year, which was $38,000. But we did change up some of those areas to be cut. So we are recommending Green Ridge Landscaping. Any questions on that?
Was that the low bid?
That was the low bid, yes.
The low bid, not just the lowest responsible bidder. But it is the lowest responsible bidder. But
Yes.
Was there a lower bid?
Mr.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure if there had been anybody else that had submitted lower but was not determined to be responsible.
We were surprised because TJ's has been our go-to for the past couple of years, and things change. Right?
Yeah, and well, Green Ridge is down off Ridge Pike, I guess, but changed ownership recently too, so surprised.
Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move that forward. Chromebook purchase, Mr. Ganesh.
Hello again. So every year we purchase Chromebooks for grades K, 5, and 9. We typically buy these Chromebooks in July. We've been having conversations with our vendors, and the current market conditions have prompted us to acquire these devices early, so it's advantageous to the district. This is something that we have done in the past as well. During COVID, when there was all the supply chain restrictions, we bought these Chromebooks early so that they are here on time. So similar to that, we are requesting the Chromebooks to be purchased early this year as well. There is no additional cost to the district due to this early procurement process. And we typically lease these Chromebooks, and the lease payments will not start until July 1st. So it's a business as usual. So it aligns with our accounting cycles as well. Any questions? The next one is the E-rate.
Yeah. I was just gonna hit up, so the 504 is the actual leasing dollars. We have our bids out in the street. We are collecting information from banks. So we hope to have those for next Monday night.
All right, so the next item is E-rate. Every year we apply for E-rate to offset some of the cost for the technology services. And here's a list of projects that we are at the bottom. That's a list of projects that we are applying for E-rate for this year. If awarded, these would offset our cost by about 50%. And just want to also mention that this E-rate application is just to secure the funding. If for some reason the new school year, if the district portion of the monies is not available, there's not an obligation for us to move forward with that project. And on the top right there, you would see the funding that we have received in the last 5-6 years is about $650,000. Any questions?
Could you just tell us what an E-rate discount is?
We are at 50%. We are a 50% district, meaning that any qualified projects, we would receive 50% funding of the cost of the project.
And is that from where?
So every time you pay your telephone bill or your cell phone bill, there are all those added fees that drive us all crazy. That's what goes into the federal
USAC.
Yeah, the USAC, which is the E-rate funding program at the federal government level. So those funds get siphoned off of every bill that we pay. It goes there, and then they have this program that helps local municipalities and school districts.
There's an organization that determines what it can be spent on and what the grants are for, and
Yes, sir. It's universal
encourages
service.
you to invest in those things.
Yes. It's a universal service administration company. All right, thank you.
That might be it. Okay. If nothing else, thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Weaver, thank you very much for your report. Next item, 5.02, approval of grass cutting services. This is a request to approve Green Ridge Landscaping to provide grass cutting services. Any further questions or comments on this item? Excuse me, seeing none, we'll move that to consent. Item 5.03, approval to purchase Chromebooks. This is a request to approve the purchase of 1,058 Chromebooks for the one-to-one initiative as presented. Are any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll move to consent.
If that goes to consent, I would just want it to be contingent upon receipt of financing or approval of financing.
Yes.
All right, 5.04, approval of the lease for Chromebooks is a placeholder. Item 5.05, the approval of E-rate technology purchases. This is the request to approve the purchase of the technology items as presented. Any further questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll move that to consent. Item 5.06, approval of gym divider wall replacement. This is a request to approve R.J. McCarville to provide a gym divider wall replacement at Evergreen Elementary at a cost not to exceed $82,500. This was recommended by the Safety and Operations Committee. Are there any questions or comments on this item?
Yeah, if approved, when would this get done? In the summer?
Yes, summer.
And be up and operational by August?
Yes, sir.
Any further questions or comments? If not, can we move that to consent? Item 5.08, approval of high school floor remediation work. This is a request to approve Bristol Environmental to provide floor remediation to the high school hallway at a total cost not to exceed $12,500. This was approved by the Safety and Operations Committee at their February meeting. Any questions or comments on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move that to consent.
Dr. Weston?
Dr. Weston,
Oh.
5.07 we missed.
Oh, you're right. I'm very sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Let's move back to 5.07, the approval of the sprinkler booster pump replacement. This is a request to ratify Oliver Fire Protection and Security to replace a sprinkler booster pump at Middle School West at a cost not to exceed $24,235. This item was recommended by the Safety and Operations Committee. Is there any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll move that to consent. Item 5.08, we already talked about. Item 5.09, approval of onboarding costs for Parent Square Communications Platform. There's a request to ratify the onboarding costs of $2,000 for the Parent Square Communications. This communications platform was approved in June 2024, but did not include the onboarding costs. So is there any questions or comments on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move that to consent. Item 5.10, approval to use the committed PSERS and debt service funds. This is a request to approve the use of $250,000 from committed PSERS and $573,382 from debt service to assist in achieving a balanced general fund budget. Any questions or comments on this item?
Just note that the administrative content, there's nothing in there. There's a picture, but it's just not showing.
We'll work to correct that.
Okay, so we'll keep this off consent. We can consider this next week.
It just says a PNG file, but it's not clickable.
Okay.
We don't have to keep it off consent. I mean, I'm not objecting to it, but.
On the report we just saw,
Yeah, I know.
I just don't know. I don't see it either. Mine's broken.
We will convert it to a PDF and we'll upload it again. We can correct that. Thank you.
Okay. Item 5.11, approval of 25-26 school board meeting dates. These are shown in the public content. Any questions or comments on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move to consent. Whoops, sorry, I'm going
I'm
too
sorry.
fast.
No, you're perfectly fine. So I just wanted to point out, I don't know when you see the list like that if it makes a lot of sense, but just so we're aware, there are only 2 instances in the next calendar year where school board meetings would not take place on a Monday; they would take place on a Tuesday. And that actually is part of what this approval and this list is. So I just wanted to call that to everybody's attention. The first is after Labor Day, September 2nd, and then the second is after the spring holiday days off, which would be April 7th. So just an item of note. Those would be Tuesday board meetings.
Okay, and actually, I'm glad you did hold me up because I did have a question on this. When I was on the board, 2017 to 2021, and prior to that as well, there was always a meeting in July. Do we really not have any business to conduct in July? Should we have a meeting? Or do we consider that to be unnecessary?
So the conversation that we had this previous year, and then also in having conversation about this calendar, is that the business that happens in July, we just retroactively address in August. Because there is very little approval business, because everything for the summer has been approved prior to school ending. And then, so some of it would be, just calling everybody in. So.
Okay, if everybody's good with that, then.
And I'm not objecting to the calendar, but the 8th is the last night of Rosh Hashanah.
The second night. The 8th is the second night of Rosh Hashanah. I'm sorry.
It depends if you look at it as a 3-day or a 2-day. It's the last night.
Are you talking about September 8th?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Because school's open. I'm just
Yeah,
mentioning. Right. I don't think it should be changed. I won't be there.
Fair enough.
Which is another reason to have it.
I don't normally do services on the 8th in the evening. We normally do a Sunday night. Okay, very good. You're positive. Going once, going twice, we can move it.
Oh no, I'm positive I won't be there, but.
No, are you positive that you don't contest it?
I don't care.
Okay. God, I knew I was gonna miss one. I did, I looked extra hard. It's because it's not a day I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay,
All right.
continue.
Moving on. Item 5.12, approval of 2025-26 holidays for 12-month employees. These are listed in the public content. Is there any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll move to consent. Item 5.13, approval of 2025-26 holidays for 10-month school police and security personnel. Again, these are listed in the public comment. Is there any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll move to consent. Item 5.14 is on consent. Item 5.15, approval of community education contracts. These are requests to approve the community education independent contractor agreements as listed. Any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, move to consent. Item 5.16 is a placeholder. And 5.17, the grants and donations report. There actually is a grants and donation report this month, listed in the public content, if anybody has any questions or comments here. Okay, seeing none, that ends section 5.
Thank you, Dr. Weston. Moving right along. Section 6, payment of bills, Mr. Saylor.
Do it next week, thank you.
Section 7, professional personnel, Dr. Sadler.
7.01 is on consent. Are there any questions or comments about this item? If not, it will stay on consent. 7.02 is a placeholder for next week, which is the approval of professional appointments. 7.03 is on consent, as well as 7.04. Are there any questions or comments about those two items? If not, they will remain on consent. And 7.05 is an approval of compensation agreement for the Executive Director of Human Resources. Are there any questions or comments about this item? If not, we will move that to consent. Thank you. My section is done.
And congratulations to you, Mr. Moran. Thank you for staying on. Okay, Dr. Campley is absent today. Mr. Saylor, would you sub in for her, please? Huh? Hey, good work.
Yeah, I'm not
All
gonna
right,
beat that
Bob,
one.
don't mess it up now. We're like almost done here.
I'll try not to.
Okay,
We'll see if
section
Mr.
9,
Saylor helps
governance,
me.
Mr. Liggett.
Thank you. The attached policies are offered for first reading. 9.02, the attached policies are offered for the second reading and adoption next week, unless there is any objection.
I do have a question about 9.01. With the PNN that came out, should we hold these policies off? Because it's policies 103, and that's what the PNN talks about.
I have an opinion about that.
I would love to hear it.
Let's actually, do
Well,
you want to
that's
give your
fine.
opinion before
no,
our
I
solicitor
can-
speaks, or should we let him do his?
Let me think about. No, we'll listen to Mr. Supers first.
Okay, good.
That was harsh.
Thanks.
I would request the opportunity to review the PNN in conjunction with the policy, make a recommendation to the board or district superintendent prior to the publication of the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Supers. Go ahead, Mr. Liggett.
Yeah, basically my opinion is, I don't think that I tend to agree with that. So, is there any issue though, Mr. Supers, with the fact that these policies are essentially being changed to roll back to the 2020 standards?
No, that's appropriate in light of the decision in January by the Federal District Court for the Eastern District of Kentucky, which vacated 2024 regulations, and no appeal was taken from that. So we are obligated to, the 2024 regulations are no longer in effect, so we want to retire that policy. And the 2020 regulations control. I don't believe there's anything significant in the PNN, but I'll review it.
Motion to amend. I move to amend 9.01 to only display the following policies presented for first reading: policy 104, 302, 304, 305, 306, 828.
So is there a second to the motion to amend?
Actually, there's not a motion. This is just a first reading. So couldn't we just remove those from the first reading?
You could. I'm not saying, I wanted the opportunity to refer to the PNN before I made a recommendation as to whether it's necessary.
Could I
Is there
suggest-
anything specific that you're referring to in the PNN?
No, just that the PNN specifically mentioned policy 103.
Yeah, I know that there's another attorney in my office who generally handles policies and does work with the district here, but I discussed the PNN on 103 with her for another district. I don't believe there's anything significant, but I would like the opportunity to confirm that. So what I would recommend I would recommend that it stays on for a first reading. Remember, this is only a first reading. It can always be modified before the second reading. And if there are if there is a really significant issue, I'll recommend that the district, we can bring it up next week and make the motion to amend that. Or, yeah,
So then
remove it
just
from the
for-
first reading.
Just for clarity's sake then, at this point, if, without objection, the entire first reading will remain as it is, and that gives us the opportunity to review.
That would be my personal preference, to discuss a policy and have the discussion then, and if we need to remove it from first read at that point.
And there is a policy next Monday?
Next
Yeah,
Monday
I'll
at
have
6
the
p.m.
recommendation to you before that.
Yeah, and the 103, the changes that were made to it brings it in line with the 2020, so. But
that's correct.
let's give you the chance to read it.
Thank you, Mr. Liggett.
Yeah, I know, I'm so reasonable sometimes. All right, the attached are here for the second reading in 9.002 again. And then 9.03 is to retire policy 103.2. If there's no objections, we can retire that next week on consent. And thus endeth my section.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liggett. And that brings us to Section 10, closing items. At this point, 10.01, we afford the community once again, the opportunity to speak on any topic. I open the floor. There is no list for the second half of the meeting, just the first half. So I go ahead and open the floor, state your name and municipality, same rules apply, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Kelly Carney, Collegeville Borough. So to pick up where I left off the last time was talking about the differences in the education experience at East and West. I'm not familiar with that. I've got 2 kids at South. I haven't heard any detail about that. So whoever was asking for that detail earlier, I appreciate it. I'd like to understand that. And I think that's something that we should be able to tackle as a district without having to, I don't know, turn everything kind of upside down for a good portion of our district. That does bring up the question of equity. And I just wonder, like, is it equitable to move in this direction and have a good number of our kids endure much longer bus rides, much more challenging transportation issues, and like all the other things that it brings than this other students like within the district? You're talking about, I've heard words used like inconvenience and logistics for the parents. And I find that to really minimize the impact to what this actually is for families. This could be really disruptive. You've got people who need to get to work at 9 o'clock and their kids miss the bus, and now it's 30 minutes to West, 30 minutes back to where they're home, and then 30 minutes to their job the other way. Like you're gonna have people making difficult choices for everyday things that shouldn't be so hard. And if we had a local middle school solution, that would not be the case, or at least it would minimize those types of impacts. Sick kids, bad weather, doctor's appointments, all those things. That's everyday life. And it's not an inconvenience, and it's not a logistic issue. It's our life. And this is going to greatly impact that. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. In the last board meeting, Dr. Campley, who isn't here tonight, did ask for the community meeting to have more information about the other options, and that wasn't presented. In fact, it was the opposite. Only the one option was presented at that second community meeting. And so I just wanted to call that out. That is something the board did ask for and did not get. What are the additional costs of these, of these solutions? How's it going to impact the budget? We haven't really heard much about that. You know, we're saying it could solve some things for busing, but all in all, like a lot of these great things that you're saying that could result from this change don't have to happen alongside just this change. They can happen with the structure as it is in today. You can have a 3-tier busing system today. You can find ways to align 5th grade better across 2 schools, align 6th grade better across 2 schools, 7th and 8th grade across 2 schools better. You don't have to move to a totally separate solution of 5, 6, and 7, 8 to bring it together. I feel like we can be more creative and like just be more, more dedicated to like that process. We should be able to find like a better solution than just kind of turning our district upside down, at least our side of the district. It just feels, like a very big change that's gonna like offer very little impact at the elementary school for space. And we're gonna be here in like a year or two having this conversation again, because we're gonna be up against space again.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else?
Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Wright Conti. I'm in Collegeville. I'm here. I came tonight to find out some information. I don't question the motives of the administration by any means. However, I have to be perfectly honest that I'm leaving tonight with more questions than answers, which I think is a little bit problematic. I don't think that there's been enough due diligence for the process for the board to be able to make an educated decision on being able to realign the districts. I do think that I find a 45-minute commute for any child completely unacceptable, but that is what has been set forth. However, Mr. Ganesh said earlier today that their skip pack was already at or above the threshold for commute, which makes me really nervous for my child. I don't know if anybody at this table watched the YouTube video that was presented. It has 25 views. I'm 6 of them, so there's only 19 other views. It's true. The stops in Collegeville Crossing did not happen. They're not on the video. So that 32 minutes of footage, for me personally, having a child run up, disruptive, it's at least 10 more minutes with stopping a child, which puts it at a 40-minute commute. I have a child with anxiety. I can't imagine putting her on a bus with her not with her sibling at multiple points in the year. I do think another question I had, and I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with how board districts works, but there was a lot of talk tonight about that we don't know the consensus of the district. We don't have a pulse. Why? We're right here. poll us. Is that appropriate? I don't know, but that's an idea. Poll us. Be able to ask us what our opinion is of what this situation is. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are passionate. There's a lot of people that don't even know about it. But if there is some type of action item that is actually sent out that has maybe a one sheet that has what our options are for the district, you'll be able to get a better idea of what the district actually wants, what the people want. I think that's a really important piece for everybody to know as you guys move forward in this decision. Yeah, I had questions. I want to echo everything that Kelly just said about after-school activities, reducing time with volunteers for parents, sick days, forgotten lunch, activities in out of school. You guys see kids in school, but for those who don't know, I'm the executive director of Community Music School in Trapp. I see the kids after school. They come to us at 3:30 onwards. They're tired. They are exhausted, and they come to us to be able to educate themselves at what the district can't provide. In individual one-on-one lessons, we have over 700 students. I could not imagine having another 45 minutes of those kids coming and just being even more exhausted, and what that's up against for the parent, for the other educators that are outside of school. I think the social and emotional piece, that toll that it takes on not only the child, but also the parents to be able to get them back and forth on those pieces is just a little too much. And I would really ask that you do a little more due diligence as you weigh the options. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
I didn't even get a time. Hi, Kevin Vargo again, Collegeville Borough. I want to echo specifically the bus comment. Matthew and I watched that live tonight. We had plenty of time to watch the whole video. It didn't stop in the entire video. So you're talking about trust. You're telling us that we did this thing. We stopped multiple times for 30 seconds to 1 minute. You can watch the video. It doesn't stop. So why should we trust that data that's been presented? It's not accurate, and it's on video. So I encourage everybody to go look at that, because it's essentially falsifying data that you're sharing with the community if it's based on that video. So I'd really like some follow-up action on that, because we all know those numbers are low. We've driven to West. We know they're low. My other point is we can't reference studies from pre-COVID, okay? Like, if I was at work and I gave a data report that's 8 years old, I would be fired. Okay, it's simple. We can't reference studies from 2017. The world has changed, but data has changed as well. There's ways to get a lot more data. We shouldn't be driving that route 3 times. We should be contacting Waze and Google and getting real-time data over a course of a whole year. There are creative solutions. It could be a senior project. There are better ways to get these data. The last thing I want to say is we've heard a lot from the administration, and I'm one of those people. I'm very pragmatic. If you show me that there is a net benefit, I'm willing to take a hit for my kid if I think it's positive in the end. But the problem is, and that one slide they keep putting up, it's all words. There's no measurable data. So like, for instance, one of the principals said, we'll get an increase in ELA time. By how much? That's what the board should be asking. Like, these deltas that are being proposed compared to the current situation, they have to be measurable, so we as the community can actually say, yeah, this is worth it. We'll get behind you because my kid's gonna get 15, 20, 30 more minutes of curricular activity, and that's worth it to me because it's a 20-minute increased bus ride. We don't have that, right? We can quantify really well the negative impact, but the positive impact is really what I think the board should be asking for from the administration. What is the delta from the current situation, and what is it going to be? For background, I do this for a living. Complex strategic environments, solutions, strategies. There's a process. You define the gaps, the opportunities. You look at the different options, and then you do what's called an impact assessment of those options across your various stakeholders, the community being one of those stakeholders. You can look at what's been presented. None of those have been done. And so I just really ask, like, there's published data on how to put these strategies together. In my opinion, that's what the board should be asking the administration to come with, so you can actually make an educated decision. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hi again. My name is Kim Culp. I live in Collegeville. I do appreciate you, Mr. Taylor, asking about why are we saying we're going to look into things and then we're not looking into them. So I do appreciate that. I feel that as especially the Collegeville community, we are hearing that we're going to look into things and that doesn't happen. So Dr. Russell, you did say things would be looked into. I hope that is the case. Something I didn't get to add into my earlier comment was the transitioning in 2 years. I know somebody had said, oh, well, it's 2 years, but it's 2 years 2 times. So if we're going from 3 years at a middle school, we're in an elementary school for 6 years, but then it's 2 and 2. It's not 6, then 3, you know? So we're saying, oh, it's only 2 years, but it's 2 times. I did take offense to Mr. DeAndrea's comment about counselors in schools and not having relationships with kids as much as teachers. That is 100% not true. I know every single student at my school, and there's 450 students there, and I could tell you something about every single student. So as Mr. Fountain knows, as a counselor, for someone to say that the counselor's relationship with students is not impactful or important, that is not true. Another thing is, I really do not appreciate Ms. White's comment about Methacton School District. That is my employer. And bringing them up in this school, I heard Dr. Russell saying something about how we're not commenting on other school districts. I just don't think that's professional to talk about another school district. And also East and West middle school problems, I agree, so I appreciate you bringing it up. What are these problems that you're not sharing with us? I want to hear the same thing. It just doesn't make sense that we're asking for things to change for something that we don't know why. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm old school. Jill Heist, Collegeville. I have so many notes here, I don't know how to get through them all. But I think what it really comes down to is what we've seen here is all theoretical. There's no actual implementation plans to address any of the concerns you heard tonight. We're not here because busing is the only problem. So that narrative needs to change right now. It's not just busing. Yes, busing is a huge problem. And it seems like if you're in the 25% if you're in South, we really don't care, right? Because it's really everybody else we're worrying about here. It's not just busing. It's the transitions. I don't want my kid every other year transitioning. There's anxiety issues that are rampant, and it only exacerbates it. And changing the culture doesn't happen that quick. Administration and teachers cannot know kids that quickly coming into a building. And then we're going to have our teachers, counselors, administrators all be working on, we have to get ready for the transition. So every other year, they're going to be spending so much time preparing for a transition. And that's for mainstream. What about all the special education? Literally, their jobs are going to turn into, how do we make this transition successful? So it's not in the best interest of our kids to do all these transitions. The busing is an issue. A couple of things. If you didn't listen to the community meeting that was held last week, I really think as board members, you should. You should listen to what those parents said. There were many more people than were here tonight because they thought then the administration would be representing the things that they heard. But we saw the same exact slides that were presented in the community meeting last week. Bus schedules are not realistic, as everyone said, the 30 to 60 seconds. We don't have all the other buses on the road going in the same directions. We also don't have all the parents that will refuse to send their kids on buses and will now be driving their kids out to West. We don't talk about the shortage of drivers that constantly exists. And when you have a sub-bus driver, you can add 15 minutes to that bus ride, no matter where you're going, easily. And then you have the kids who are never ready every day. I'm at a bus stop every single day. Are you? Because we see it. Trust us when we tell you. We're here because there's a space issue. The space issue is the fact that West has so much space to offer and no one's there. That's what the numbers show. Getting rid of 3 to 4 classrooms at an elementary school does not solve the problem. It doesn't. 3 classrooms, are they turning into 4? Are we dividing them up into 4? Like, let's be creative and solve the actual problem here. It's enough. I want actual implementation plans. We have no idea on schedules, on start times, or athletics. Nothing. It's all theory. We need to put it into practice.
Anyone else?
I think my phone's going to die. Kate Trabalka, Collegeville Borough. I just wanted to, once again, I heard a lot of that this is, preliminary. That was the word I heard a lot. I can't even say it, preliminary. You know, that came up so much. And at the meeting last week, Dr. Russell said, you guys might be voting on this next month. So that scares me. That scares me a lot because there could be a bunch of other plans. And I know you had mentioned last week that this is not something new to you guys. You guys have been talking about this for a while. I know Jill can say that it's been going on for quite some time, like 6 years or something like that. It's new to a lot of us. And it's really scary to a lot of us. And change is hard and everything. And the kids are resilient and the kids will be okay. But it just doesn't seem like enough effort has been put in to looking at all of the options, including, and this is something I'm not from around here, I don't understand why, and I'm sure you guys do, why do you split 2 schools to go to 2 different middle schools? Why are you splitting up Friends? I don't understand it. And I guess it has something to do with the location, but you're willing to have my kids take a 45-minute bus ride. Why wouldn't you keep the kids together and have everybody go to the same middle school that their friends are at? To me, it just doesn't make sense. So maybe that's something, and I think you brought that up earlier. Why isn't that being looked at? At least looked at with information, with data. And I feel like, you know, Dr. Russell, you said before, it's qualitative. It's qualitative. I mean, there has to be more to it than we feel this way. There has to be some kind of study. There has to be something then, well, we know this is going to be okay. We know this is going to work. You can't, as Kevin said, you can't make big changes like this based on no data, no proof. I can come up and say anything I want. If I have no proof to back it up, what does it matter? And that's what it feels like we're doing today, talking about something that doesn't have actual data and is still very preliminary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Nope.
Can somebody cede their time to somebody?
Can't do that either. That's been tried. I'm sorry.
Not enough time.
We'll be here next week.
Unfortunately, I'll be working.
Erin Mercadante, TRAP. It's really frustrating. I mean, it feels like deaf ears when I hear someone reference and point back that some of the enrichment, some of the quality things that are going to be gaining is better, and we should overlook some of these concerns. Overlooking some of these concerns, those concerns are my children, their well-being. I'm hearing all these talks about all the extra services and things that are needed for individuals with special needs, and I'm so glad that you guys are implementing all that because that directly impacts me. But it also feels like a little bit of a scapegoat because these transitions, they're not just when I hear about special education, forgive me, I can't think of her name right now, talking about educating staff and helping them with these transitions. The transitions are real and they're physical regressions that happen for these kids with special needs or kids that suffer from anxiety and change. This means that every 2 years, my son, instead of growth with his peers moving forward with education, is going to have these step backs. So this happened 2 years in a row now, kindergarten and now first grade, a third of his year with this regression from transition, from staff learning how he learns. I can go in and I can give them everything. I'm telling you, I've given them cheat sheets of what works for my child, and yet somehow it just doesn't click. There's not a consistency. And you're talking about every 2 years, he's going to start getting familiar with staff members, and then he's going to go to a new school. And I'm just going to hope and pray that you guys are consistent and that the commitment is the same. And I'm at a loss right now because I don't trust that. And that's happening now with small numbers. You're asking these kids now to become, I think someone said it, little fish in big pond. He's only one of so many in his class, but when he gets to 5th, 6th building, he's going to be one of triple that number now. How are you going to handle that with triple, actually it might be 4 times the number of children with IEPs and their individualized needs? I didn't even talk about concerns about the general education when it comes to my son, and just having over 330 plus kids in a grade level in one building, how are they not going to become numbers? How do they get that chance to actually have real relationships? I don't know. I don't know. Go on.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay. Seeing nothing else from the audience, I open the table to board comment.
Do we have social workers? We have social workers, right? Isn't it National School Social Workers Week? I think it's Social Workers Week this week. So just want to give a shout out to our social workers in the district, to thank them for all of their hard work supporting our students and families and staff. So just give them a little shout out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sadler. Anyone else?
Don't forget March is Women's History Month, so I'd like to commend all the wonderful and amazing and phenomenal mothers, sisters, daughters, aunts, who have made a difference in this country. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Going once, twice. Okie dokie. 10.03, notice of video disclaimer, video recording disclaimer, and 10.04 is adjournment. We did not have an executive session today. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week.
Find the link and send it to you.